students. And you could have any number of attributes. If you kind of think of students, the student name comes to your mind, student email comes to your mind, the program the student is enrolled in, then what else? The semester he or she is enrolled in, right? These are so many things that you can think about a student. Many of you are doing well, but then there are many who are not doing well. So again, I'll repeat as much as I can, but at this stage, from what I have taught in class, you should have aced this exam. Like there was nothing that was kind of difficult in it. Now when I do it with you, you'll realize it. So even late realization is not bad, but if you really haven't done well at all, you really are struggling, then you really need to see your coordinator or to see me for some help. And I don't know at this point of time how much help I can give you, but if you want to come and talk to me face to face, and I'll be very blunt with you if I know whether you can or whether you can't, right? But I still don't want you to give up if you're getting there. But it's up to you. You can come and see me if you like, if you're still concerned about your marks. But definitely students who have a 0 need to come and see me this week. I have 3 office hours spread over the week. Please come and see me. It is compulsory. Otherwise, I'll just take future action as to whatever the action is. Okay, so now let's look at it. So what I have done here is I only wanted from you a few things. So notice I said give me comments. So I don't know. I don't remember how many comments I've put in. Oh, it's the wrong file I've picked up. Do you have this file too that has Venus names in it? Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, guys, please remove it. Yuck. Oh God, he'll kill me. I can't do that, right? I made a mistake. Sorry, could you just remove that file? That means I've given you wrong files. That's strange. Oh, you know what has happened? I think it has replaced my files. Oh,
so we need to undownload.
Yeah, please, not undownload it. You just don't use it, is all I'm saying. Right. I've made a mistake. Don't use them.
Yeah, I took out the Venus part.
No, it's not the right solution. It's not the one that I want to work with.
Not the right solution.
Yeah, it's not my solution. Let's say it like that. It's not my solution. I want you to give it. I'll give you my solution. Give me a minute.
So should I delete the student 3 Java that I downloaded with Venus's name in it?
Yeah, please delete the whole file. Now, where did I put my file? That means, oops. I can't believe this. I hope he's not. Did I do something really messed up? I don't want to write the whole thing again. But anyway, let's see very quickly. Personal. I have a personal here which says midterm Tuesday, and so it's Tuesday today, right? No, that doesn't seem to be because. Okay, give me a minute, guys. Okay, this is mine. Okay. Anyway, okay, give me 1 minute. Let me put this on Blackboard. I made a mess. So personal. Sorry about that. Guys, please remove it from your laptop, wherever you've saved it. Just remove that file, please. My mistake. Just came from the wrong folder. Please download now and see that you have the right one. I'm giving you the other file called patient.java also. This was the exam the other section did. If you want to download it, that's up to you. It was very similar, of course. You can't have 2 different exams for the same class. And that's how some solutions passed from this section to the other section. But anyway, so you can download that too. And then now please open that one. Hopefully that's the right one now. Okay, let me see if I have the right one now. Looks like this is mine. That's what I thought. I usually don't write comments like what he had, but anyway. And please again change the. Yeah, this is mine. It has my name on it. Sorry about that. So please see that you remove the file of that student that you downloaded from your laptop space. Okay, so I haven't put all comments, right? Commenting was a part of what you did. What I found was the purpose, the class definition was not so good. Otherwise, most of you did get the returns and things okay. Not fine, but okay. Many of you didn't know how to write a return or a param, but you know what? Look at my examples. So what does this class do? This class defines a student class or a student entity, you could say, a student object, you could say, right? Each student has an identification number and marks in various courses. So these are its attributes. It defines the methods to return the ID, the marks, and the average mark of the student and add a mark for the student. So all you do is you just spell it out. What are you doing? You're saying that the student, the information about the student is each student has an identification number and marks in various courses. Those were your attributes. As I said, there could have been many attributes. I just stuck to 2 because it's an exam. We just have 3 hours to do it. So I can't say, okay, think about it and do whatever, right? That goes in assignments, like you did your game, where I said, okay, think about a game and do it yourself, okay? But here, when it's an exam, I have to be very particular that I only have a limited time to do it, and I'm asking the same of all students in my class. Then I said it defines the methods to return the ID. You had to return the ID, the marks of these students, and the average mark of the student, right? All this had to be returned and add a mark for the student. You were able to add a mark for the student. So this was the definition that I required for the class. So in the class definition, you just say what the attributes are, just normal English. Don't use technical terms like array, list, and all that. You don't. Have you ever seen it used in Java? No, if you have used the API. Then, of course, the author and the since, and only a couple of students didn't know how to do this even, like add author and add since. So can't say much about that. How do you define your attributes? You define your attributes. All attributes are private. So these are your attributes, your fields, whatever you would like to call them. Right? So I wanted both attributes to be private. I said there was a private. I had already mentioned in the exam. Though even if I don't remember, data hiding is a kind of a norm in classes. Though it's not a rule, but data hiding is said that's a principle of object-oriented programming. So it's a principle, hide your data from the outside world. So both variables are private. One was the number, which was basically the ID of the student, which was a string. And the second one, I kind of helped you out during the exam. A few of you were able to figure it out, a few not, but I kind of just gave a hint to everybody. And if you knew what you were doing, almost all of you got it right. But if you didn't even know what you were doing, then of course, there's not much I can help you with. Hints don't help if you don't even understand what I'm trying to say, right? Hints only help if you know what I'm talking about. Okay, so what do we need? We need a list to save the marks of the student. That's all we need. So it's not a mark, and we don't know how many. So we can't say, oh, we'll declare 10 variables, we'll declare 4 variables. We can't even work with a single variable because it was a list of marks. So list, there are many collections in Java. Since you had used array list in class with me, I hoped you would use array list, but you could go with list also if you want. It was up to you. But because we had done an example on array list and you had seen methods of the class, that was the most easiest to pick up. But nothing stopped you. You could use whatever you like. Array list is the easiest to use, right? It has so many methods. We had done an example in class. You had done the card game in which I'm sure you had used array list. So I thought that would be the easiest. So I said list. I didn't say array list or anything. I left it to you. So I think leaving one student, almost everybody used an array list, which is fine. If you want to use any other collection, I'm not stopping you. It's up to you. So how do you declare a list? You say that it is an array list, and then comes the type of elements in the list. So the student marks, each of the student mark was an integer, right? So what do you need? A collection of integers. So you could have used an array, but we cannot because every student was enrolled in different courses. A student could be enrolled in no courses, some in 5, some in 10, some in 15. We didn't know. We had no clue, so we couldn't use an array, right? So array was not the right data structure to use here at all because it's not dynamic in nature. It is of a fixed size. Right? Now, the only thing you have to remember in an array list is, and that hint was on the exam also, just in case you didn't read the array list documentation properly when you went to the class definition, that an array list is a collection of objects. So you can't use basic data types here. It's just how it is. You can't use a basic data type here. Right? So if your marks was a collection of integers, you couldn't do this. So some of you were doing it, and it was mentioned in the exam, but maybe it wasn't making sense to you just because maybe you hadn't heard it before. All you had to do was change the int to an integer. Every basic data type in Java has a corresponding class Float, small f, has a float class, capital F. Double, D small, has a double class. Long int has a long int class. Int has an integer class. All these classes are available in Java. They're all available. And they're so easy to use now. They were difficult in Java when Java was first introduced, but you don't even have to bother about it. Don't even worry about it. Just declare it to be a list of capital I integer. All you're saying is what? You're saying I need a list in which I can save integer values. And you call it whatever you like. Right? So I called it student marks because it makes sense. So I don't want to see X, Y, A, B. I want to see some solid, useful names. Right? So there were marks for Java naming conventions and how you're naming your variable. That's all that you needed. Nothing else. I didn't ask for anything else because you didn't need anything else. So you're saying, oh, how will I know the number of courses? You have a list in which are kept the courses, the marks. And depending upon how many courses you are enrolled in, you have as many marks. So the size of the list will give you the number of courses. You don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to kind of save it or use it. It's right there. So the array list class comes with the various methods. There is add, there is remove, there is clear, there is size, there is empty. There are so many methods. You are fine using the Java API. You were allowed to use the Java API. I had done a few. I had done add in class. I remember doing add. I had done size in class. So at least you knew two of them. Clear was the only one that maybe you hadn't heard of, but all you have to do is open up the documentation and look through the class. Right? Now, since I said I want to see good and efficient code, please use named constants and all that. You needed to declare two named constants. Why? Because remember I said the student mark lies between 0 and 100. Anything else, please throw an exception. Right? And there was a reason why I said an exception object. When I'm asking an exception object, I'm not expecting an illegal argument exception from you. I'm not expecting anything else but an exception object. Right? So I don't know, just because I had done my exception in class, you thought, oh, she needs my exception. You're writing exception classes and doing stuff. I don't know, like where does it come from? It's just wasting your time. And when I say I need an exception, I don't need an illegal argument exception. Why? I'll tell you when we go forward. There is always, I'm asking for something because I want to test you on something. Okay. So I need two constants here. One, because my mark was between 0 and 100 was a valid mark, and anything below 0 or above 100 was invalid. Right? So I need two constants. Constants in Java are written all in caps. They're written all in caps. And since they're written all in caps, you kind of have to put an underscore to kind of between words if you have more than one word. Right? Two, it is a good idea to make it a class constant because every object needs it. So what's the sense of creating constants locally inside your object? Doesn't make sense. Everybody needs to use it. All of you know that the class marks are between 0 and 100. I don't have to give this information to each one of you. So make it a static constant. Static means it belongs to the class. And the word final means it is a constant. If you don't put final, it's not a constant. It's a variable. I mean, what's the sense of declaring a variable and giving it an initial mark, right? Now, the only place where you will see, it's not necessary, but the only place, if ever you will see in Java where initializations are done right where you declare them is in constants. You could actually initialize them in the constructor also. You can do that. For final, you can do it once in the constructor. But this is the only place in Java where you declare and initialize anything. You don't initialize things here. You don't say, oh, student ID, I want to give it a blank to begin with. Or with an array list, I want to go new here. You don't do it here. It's just not done here. In other languages, yes, if you've done other languages, it is done in C, it is done in C++, but not in Java. It's not the norm. The constructor does everything that needs to be done. Here. So that's all you need, right? So these constants, some of you did it, some of you didn't, but of course there were marks for it. So in the rubric, you'll have marks accordingly. Now comes the constructor, right? Basically, the constructor constructs an object. That's its job. And keep in mind, construction means giving something to your object, initializing it. And what do you mean by initializing? Initializing its instance variables. That's all a constructor does, right? So I said, initialize the name of the student and the array list or the list of marks, right? Now, 90% of students they understood what I was saying, but a couple of students thought, oh, she wants the student ID also, and she wants to initialize the array list coming from outside. I didn't say that. I said just initialize it. But I didn't dock off marks because their thinking was different. I gave them their marks as long as the rest of the code matched it. So what will the constructor expect from you? It needs a parameter. What is the parameter? The student ID. That's all. So when you create a student object, the student needs an ID. And where will this ID come from? Are you going to ask the student using a scanner object? Of course not, right? The constructor will expect this from you as a parameter, and then it will initialize, it will assign it to your instance variable. Now I'm not using a set method here. You and many of you did, just by virtue of, I think, because we do it all the time. But here is an example where you don't need a set method, because I said the student ID is only initialized once. You cannot change it. It's only initialized once. You cannot change it. So what's the use of a set method? You don't need a set method. A set method is required if the value of that variable can be changed in future. But student ID never needed to be changed. So once you set it, you cannot change it. You'll say, so what do I do if I make a mistake? You'll have to delete that object and create a new object. That's what you will do. So set was done by almost all of you. I hardly saw this, but I didn't dock off marks there. If you want to create a set, that's fine. But then at least make it private, because if you make it public, then it is available outside the class and it can be changed. So you've lost that. Well, now I can change it from my outside the class. So if you want to keep a set method for whatever reason you like to keep a set method, do it, but then you make it private. Why? Because the ID cannot be changed once you have set it. Right? So this was how I wanted you to do it. But set was, as I said, almost all of you did set because I think you are just used to it. But here is an example where you don't need a set. But I don't think, only maybe a couple of students out of 60 made it private. Rest all made it public. I didn't dock off marks. I didn't. I should have, but I did not. I said, okay, maybe they just didn't think about it because you've never seen it. But here it is. So if you want to do it in a set method, do it, but then keep the set method private, because nobody can do it once the student ID has been set. So you have to think. You just can't copy and paste. Some of you copy and paste code and you don't even change the comments. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, I do something in class, you copy it. You're creating an array list of card objects for marks. Like, how is that possible? I mean, does it make sense? No, it doesn't. Right? So what does it do? It creates a student and it sets the student ID, and all it does, it creates an empty array list. When a student object is created, the student doesn't have marks yet. He doesn't, right? It's just a new student object. Now, a couple of you, as I said, assumed the student has marks, and you passed an array list as a parameter to the constructor, and then you initialize your array list. That's okay. If you did it, I still gave you marks. But that's all I wanted from you, an empty list. Nothing, there's nothing in it. And if you forget to do this, then you cannot, your program won't work. You have to create the object to work with it. Like anything else, your list is an object. It's an array list object. Unless you create it, how do you create it? Notice you're calling the constructor. You always call the constructor to create an object. So if a student needs to be created, your constructor will be called. That's what a constructor does. So what have I done? I've created an empty array list. Now, a few of you had this statement right here, equal to here, right in the declaration. Don't do it. It's not the norm in Java. We don't do it where we declare it. Everything is done in the constructor. It's just how it is. You can't say, oh, it's not wrong, but that's not the norm. Do it if you have to. I don't really care if you don't want to listen, right? But it has to be done in the constructor, right? So this is all I needed in the constructor. So what did the constructor need? One parameter, just one parameter. That parameter is for the student ID. Why? Because the student needs an ID. Assign it to the student ID of the object and then create an empty array list. So the other option that some students did was this. I'm just telling you because you may need to do it. A second parameter was passed, which was of type array list, of type integer. And they called it marks, for example. And now instead of this, they wanted to initialize the student marks to that list. But now here comes the question. Have you even checked? Have you even checked whether these marks are, what is it saying? Let's see. Cannot find symbol. Student marks. Oh, students marks. Student marks. There it is. Did you even check that the marks were valid? No. You just assumed that the array list that was being given to you had valid marks. I think a couple of students checked and a couple of students didn't even bother to check. But that's okay. I said at least they're thinking, but this is not what I expected from you. But that doesn't mean I docked off marks here. I took your viewpoint. I said, oh, they're saying when a student object is created, the student has an ID and he or she already has some marks, which is okay. It's not a bad assumption. It's not an invalid assumption. So if you assumed it that way and you did it this way, I was still okay with it. I was still fine with it as long as you validated that marks list. Because remember, marks can only lie between 0 and 100. If you did not, you're basically saying, give me a list of marks, and as long as it has integers, I'll just use it. But what if it is less than 0 and more than 100? If you don't bother to do it, then that statement is incorrect anyway. Right? You're not doing it. So I wasn't expecting this from you. But if it was done and it was done properly, like you kind of took care that, oh, the marks were between 0 and 100 or whatever, I didn't dock off marks. I said, that's fine. That's what the student thought maybe. And that was fine. But this is all you require. Yes.
What if you don't pass any parameter? Like you just...
Okay, so if you don't pass any parameter, what will you assign to the student ID? How will you initialize your student ID? So a student object gets created. What is the ID of the student? And there is no set method. There isn't. You just assume there was a set method, but there is no set method. It's only done once.
So if I don't pass the parameter and I use set method, it's gonna be okay.
No, but how will you call, with what will you call the set method? Like what will you put here? How will you, even if you have a set method, you have something like this. What will you pass it? Like what will you pass this method? What is the use of a set method? Takes a value and assigns it to an instance variable. That's what a set method does. Right? That's what it does. So unless you provide that value to the set method, how will it set it? You don't want to set it to a blank. Not every student has, that means every student that you create will have a blank ID. Or if you don't even do that, then every student has an ID of null. Remember, by default, it's a string variable, it's a string object, it's null. Every student object has null in it. So there is no other way of doing it. This is the only logical way of doing it. And you're not going to ask the user, what is the student ID? We don't do that in classes, we know that, right? So when you write a method, keep in mind, what does the method need? And constructor is just a method. So what does it need to create an object? It needs the ID of the student and if, though I didn't mention it, and the marks of the student. It needs two things. I kept it simple. I said, don't even bother about marks. Just initialize it, empty. So if you don't pass a parameter, then the whole, what do I do with it? If there is no parameter, then the constructor is doing what? Creating an object with student ID null and array list. If you forget this statement also for whatever reason, then list equal to null. Both your instance variables are null. You have to pass a value. There is no other way you can work with it. There is no other way you can work with it, right? So that's the constructor. That's all you require. That's all, nothing else. Don't forget this. If you forget this, then you will have runtime errors when you start working with student. Why? Because you've created a student object, but the student object has a list inside it called student marks, but it is null. You haven't even initialized it. So null means it does not exist. You can't use it. So if you want to use it, which we want to put data into it, we want to put his or her marks into it, I have to initialize it. So the minimum parameter is the student ID. If you gave me two parameters, the student ID and the student marks, and used it correctly, it's just not you gave me two and I will give you marks for it, and used it correctly, I still gave you marks for it. I didn't dock off marks. I just took your viewpoint, which is fine. And it can happen. I could say initialize the student ID and initialize the marks to a set of marks. It was just more difficult. It was more difficult, so I didn't expect you to do it. Why difficult? Because you'll have to validate what's coming in. The input array list had to be validated. The marks were within range. And I didn't even expect it from you. I said, you know what? It's maybe they can think at that point. Now the get student ID was simple. Most of you got it right. So what is it? The get student ID returns. What is the return statement? And in the comments, please don't say get the student ID. I mean, it's called a get method. You could even not call it get at all. You could just say, give me the student ID. But we usually use gets and sets because it's a convention. These methods are called gets and sets. So in your comments, please say this method returns the student ID. So just because many of you still don't know how to put the return, so just write a normal English comment. Don't mention, you can even go far as this, like a normal sentence. Nobody knows what you called your student ID. I don't want to see this name at all in your comments. We don't even know what you called it. Does anybody see your class code? No. So don't say add return, and this was common. This is absolutely, oops, this is absolutely incorrect. This is not a correct return statement. Oh, come on. This is not a correct statement at all. This return is useless. It's not telling me anything. Like, how can you assume that giving me the name of the variable doesn't make sense at all? Because nobody can see that variable. We don't even know what that variable is. So all you have to do is you have to kind of copy it from here and put it here. Just normal. You don't have to give variable names in return. You shouldn't be giving variable names in return. Why? Because the user can see it. Do I know what variables did they use in their string class? I have no clue. Do they even mention the variables in the Java API? Of course not. I have no clue what they called it, and I'm not interested. I'm only interested in looking at the method description. What does it do and what does it give back? They're just normal comments. That's all I need. The whole thing won't even take an hour if you do it from A to Z, not even an hour. So that's get student ID. All I said is return the marks, right? Now return the marks. You know that marks is a list. So what will be the return type? An array list of type integer. It's a list. I want it back from you. Just give it to me. Call the method whatever you like, but please give it a useful name. I called it get student marks because it was plural. It is returning an array list, and I said return my marks. So again, don't say add return student marks. Say return the marks of the student. Just normal English, or return the list of marks of the student. That's all you have to do. Get number of courses. Now, I said a student has some marks, and I said a mark corresponds to a course. So if the student is taking 5 courses, he will have 5 marks. If 2, then 2. If 0, then 0. Doesn't matter, right? So what do you need? How many marks does the list have? Nothing. All you need to do is take the size of the list and give it back. That tells you how many courses the student is taking. I used a method called size of the array list to return how many courses the user is doing. So again, it's normal English. And if you are kind of still not so sure about your comments and spellings or your grammar, put it in Word and copy. You have to make it a habit, guys. You can't be programmers without writing comments. And if you don't want to be, then that's another thing altogether. So what does it return? There. That's all I need. Right? Doesn't even take a minute to put in a comment. And the only thing here I have to do is I have to use the size method of the array list. And what is my array list? Student marks. Get the size and then return it to the whoever is calling that method. That tells me how many courses the user has. Right? Now comes a little tough method. So there's nothing here till now that you couldn't have done. You know what I mean? Like get are okay. And most of you got the gets right. Whether you knew what you were doing or not, I'm not sure. Not everybody knows still what they're doing, but whoever did it well, I'm glad you are kind of getting there. And if you need more help, you have to ask for it. And then now this was a little more verbose. You needed 4 lines instead of a line. So what was expected? What did this method say? It says this method add student mark adds a mark to the list. How clear is that? Adds a mark to the list. So if it adds a mark to the list, it definitely wants a mark from you. It definitely needs a mark from you. So that's the parameter. So that's how you decide. What do I need? What are my parameters? I'm not going to even tell you what the parameters are. What am I leaving to you then? Nothing. That is why I didn't give my tester to you, because if you could put 2 and 2 together, Who knows who could and who couldn't. But if you could put 2 and 2 together, you'll say, oh, she has 2 parameters there, I need 2 parameters. She has 1 parameter there, I'll put 1 parameter. So you think about it. Now, just so that you know, this type, I can write int here and it will still work. It will still work because the int data type, basic int data type and the integer class object are interchangeable. Like Java has done that for you. You don't have to worry about it. It automatically converts a small int into a capital integer object and then puts it in the array list, and vice versa. Takes an integer object out of the array list, converts it into an int data type and gives it to you. You don't have to worry about it. At this stage, no. If you're seeing some old Java programs, Java 2, then we had to do this conversion ourselves. The programmer had to do it, to convert an integer from an int to an integer and vice versa. We don't have to do it now, so you don't even have to bother. So I would take both. I wasn't expecting you to write an int or an integer. I'll take both, but you must understand what you're doing. So this is allowed. This interchange is allowed, right? Just because Java says, oh, I forgot. And this is the only place where Java is non-object oriented. Java has these basic data types, int, float, double, character, boolean. This is the only place where Java is non-object oriented. These are the only types that are not objects. They are basic data types. They are value types. The value is inside the box. Not, the address is not in the box. And so what did Java do? Java gave corresponding classes for it and said, anytime you want to convert, do it. And then Java said, oh, don't even bother. I'll do the conversion myself. So you don't even have to bother about it. The only thing you have to be careful is when you declare your array list. You can't leave it int, you have to go integer. That's all. Because an array list is a collection of objects only, not of basic data types. Objects only. And we don't have to do anything. We just have to write the right class for it. If I said marks were float, you would use an array list of type float, capital F. If I said it was an array list of double marks, then you would go double D capital. But otherwise you will just go int. So you can use either int or integer here, doesn't matter. Both will work. Right now, what is the aim? This method said if the mark was between 0 and 100, it was valid, otherwise it was invalid. So what did I do? I said if the mark was less than the minimum mark or greater than the maximum. This condition can be reversed. I did it this way. You could have done the other way. You could have said the student mark was greater than equal to minimum mark and less than or equal to maximum mark, it was valid. I usually write my throws first. It's just a habit. You could do either way, doesn't matter. So I am saying if the mark is invalid, so I'm basically checking if the mark is invalid. That's what I'm checking. If you have your or your ands wrong, your condition is wrong. Basically, the method will not work correctly. So I didn't give you a 0 or anything. I just docked off marks for your wrong condition. So I've been very lenient in giving marks. I really am, because I'm trying to push you. If you're trying your best, I'm saying, okay, you're going there, you're going there. But if you don't even know what you're doing, then you know what? It's high time you realized it. Okay. So what have I said? I've said if it is less than or equal to minimum mark and greater than equal to maximum mark, throw an exception object. And I wanted an exception and not an illegal argument exception, as some of you have done, because I wanted to see this throws clause here, which we've done in class. I've already talked about exception handling. I'll do more of it for you. But we've already done this. I've shown you how to try, catch. Finally, we've done everything. I want to see this. If you use an illegal argument exception, you don't need to add this clause of throws exception. Because illegal argument exception is a type of exception. There are two classes of exception. One, which are called runtime, and the others, they don't have a name, but let's call it non-runtime. For runtime, you don't have to put the throws clause at all. You don't have to. It's just that's fine. You don't have to. It's just a syntax. I made it exception, and I said it is an exception. An exception can be of any kind, so it needs a throws clause. Illegal argument exception doesn't need a throws clause. So when I say I need you to throw an exception, I want to see an exception being thrown. You're not following instructions. Again, I didn't kind of dock off marks right in the method, half a mark and so on. I kind of said, you know what, you forgot about it. I took off marks in redundant code. I have to take it off somewhere, but I kind of went lenient. You don't need an else here. So what am I saying? If the mark is invalid, throw an exception, and please put a good message. The mark must be an integer value between, and use your constants again. You don't use 0 and 100 here. What was the sense of declaring the constants? Again, it was in black and white on your exam also, just so that you are not thinking at that time. I know you're tensed, so I'm giving you everything. Just pay attention. That's all you have to do. So I show the minimum mark and I show the maximum mark. Otherwise, you don't have to put an else here because throw is like a return, right? So as soon as it encounters a throw, it returns to whoever had called it. So whoever calls this method add student mark, it goes back there. So it's like a return, and an abnormal return, you could say. It's like an abnormal return, but it is a return. So I don't have to have an else because it has returned from here. Else, what do? I just add this mark to my list. There is an add method. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to call it. So your list object dot add, and what do you want to add? This mark that I just gave you. I didn't even say add it at the first position, add it, make it sorted, nothing. I just said add it. There are variations of add. You can add it at a particular position. But I didn't even say that. I said just add it. So it was the easiest to be asked. Add, the method is available. So this was a method that had 4 lines, not much, but there it is. So check it. If it works, if it is invalid, throw an exception, else add it. Done. Right? But you need a throws here. When you use an exception object, you need a throws here. If you use an illegal argument exception, you don't need a throw. And that's why I said I needed you to throw an exception. Let's look at the average now. And I said that the average can be a real value. It's something that you should know, but maybe your math is not so good and you're not thinking at that time. So I'm telling you, the float, it can be a real value. So you could use float here, you could use double here. Whatever you like. I didn't say anything. I just said real. I didn't want to say float or double. I said real value. Think about it. When you take a few numbers, even if they're integers, you add them and divide them, you may have and I gave you an example. Marks were integers and the average was 61.4 or something. I gave you an example. I'm giving you examples to show you that it can be float. And still some of you are going with integer. So the return type is either float or it is a double, whatever you like. What does this method do? It calculates the average. And let me kind of, since it has a param here, does it return anything? It returns a float, right? And if you make a spelling mistake, it tells you, like, all you have to do is just take a split of a second to do it. Okay, so it has a returns and it has, and I see it kind of put a return and it throws for me also. So you can miss it. Like, you know, it needs a throw. But if you just leave it like this, I'm not giving you marks for this because you didn't fill it up. So it needs a param now. In the param, you mention the name. Oh, it doesn't need a param even. Oops, sorry. It doesn't even need a param. So what does it return? The average mark in all courses for the student. And again, please don't give me the name of your variable that is storing the average mark, this float average. I don't even want to see it. I don't even know what you're doing. All I want to see is the average mark in all courses for the student, or the student's average mark, whatever makes more sense. This is making more sense. Right? That's all you do. I thought it had a param. Don't we have anything with the param? I think we had something with the param. Oh, here, we had this one with the param. Just let me show you how to write parameter ones. It's not a tough one, but anyway, what does this do? See, it automatically adds this. So don't expect me to give you marks for this. These comments are automatically added. What now? Notice how it gives the name of the parameter here, because these signatures are shown in the Java API. You will see the signatures. So when you're seeing the signature, you are seeing this variable name. You're seeing this local variable name, this parameter or argument. So what is it? It is the mark of the student to be added to the list. Like, how much more help do you need from NetBeans? It's saying I need a param, and notice how it puts the name here. Did you notice that ever it puts something in front of return? No, it doesn't. So return does not need a variable name because nobody can see it. You'll say, then how can you see this? Because these signatures are right in Java doc. These signatures appear in your Java documentation. So I can see it. It's right there. And what does it throw? An exception. When does it throw an exception? Throw exception when the mark to be added is invalid. And you can say what invalid is. Does not lie between 0 and 100. Now here I can't use constants. I'll have to use like numbers. I can't use constants here. There it is. And here, what does this method do? This method adds there it is. So for param, if you have more, you will just have more param. For throws, you will have to add a throws clause. For return, you just say add return. With the param name, you mention the name of your parameter. You have to, because you're saying this is what this parameter does. This is what this parameter does. If you have 10 parameters, you're kind of defining them. So you have to have the name. With return, it doesn't make sense because I don't know what you call your variable, right? Okay, so that was an example of param. Okay, so let's look at calculate. So the return type is float, right? The student's average mark in all courses. And if it is a float, the variable that you're using to calculate the average has to be a float. It can be an integer, right? But keep in mind, if I add everything, addition of integers gives an integer. If I divide it by the size, which is also an integer by integer is always an integer. Even if you put it in a float variable, it's not going to help. If I say 3 divided by 2, the answer is 1. It's not 1.5. Taking this one and putting it into a float variable will just put 1.0 in it. It won't put 1.5 in it. So you have to be careful of your variables. So this was quite common. This mistake was quite common, that here the return type was okay, but here they had taken an int to sum it up. So they were summing as an int and then dividing it and then putting it in a float variable. It won't work because the answer will be incorrect. Right? So what did I do? I said, and again, avoid local variables. Don't create as many. I can work with one. Why do I need to put sum in one and then average in another? I don't have to do anything with sum after I'm done. So let me use the same variable. What did I do? I said, if the list was empty, you could do it 2 ways. You could use the size method if the size was 0, or if the list was empty, there is an isEmpty method. Throw the exception, the student is not enrolled in any course. Right? The student is not enrolled in any course. That means the list is empty. Why am I doing this? I didn't have to ask you. You should have thought about it yourself. But again, I'm saying throw an exception if there are no courses. Otherwise, half the class will not even do it. How can you calculate average if the student has no courses? Because dividing by 0 will give you a runtime exception. Division by 0 is not allowed. It's an arithmetic exception. So I kind of gave this hint also. I said, check that the list is not empty. So what am I saying? Again, I need the throws clause here, and therefore I made you throw the new exception. I didn't say throw arithmetic exception, because arithmetic exceptions, again, don't need the throws clause. They are that class of exceptions that don't need it, right? So what am I saying? Is the list empty? If it is empty, just throw, you're done. Your job is done. You don't have to do anything else. There's no sense of calculating average. What's the sense if the student is not enrolled? Otherwise, what do? I use a for each loop. A few of you have used the other for loop. That's more work. You have to know where to start at the 0th position. You have to know where I have to stop at size -1. Then you have to increment it every time. Why would you do that much work? Right? So if you were writing the other for loop, see, more work. You have to take an int variable. Here I is okay because it's a loop variable. You have to go on till it is less than the size of your student marks. And again, if I'm using a method more than once in a method, like size has been used many times, I'll just put it in a local variable. But I've used empty there. And every time I have to increment 1. This is more work. I have to think, oh, I have to start from 0. I have to think I have to stop at size. If you kind of go greater than equal to, you're off by an error. There's the wrong answer. You have to stop at size -1. Because size says how many? 5, so you have to go from 0 to 4. So there are more chances of making a mistake here. But now this one automatically does it. It picks up 1 mark at a time from the list, 1 mark at a time, puts it in a local variable. But that's its syntax. You have to declare the local variable right here. Again, you could have done int here. Nothing stops you. Nothing stops you. You could have done an int and it was fine. It will automatically do the conversion. It will take an integer and put it in an int. I went everywhere a capital integer so that you were not confused. But now that we are talking, you can kind of see that I can do it, right? So this for loop is recommended. Recommended in the sense it's better. So again, I didn't dock off marks as long as your loop was correct. But look at the difference. Isn't the second one easier? You don't have to bother about anything. So for each, make a habit of using a for each for your collections. Any collections, use them. They can also be used in arrays. But but use them. Bless you, right? So what did I say? I said pick up 1 mark at a time from this list that comes on the right hand side, put it in this local variable and keep adding it to my average. So pick up 1, add it to the average, pick up the second one, put it in the average, keep adding to the average. And average was a float variable. So even if I'm adding integer marks at the end, my variable average will be whatever, 120.0. It will be a 0.0, but it will be a float variable. Why did I create a float variable? Because now I want to do this. Then I say return the average divided by the size. I say return it. Now, if by chance you had taken this to be an int, which is not incorrect syntactically, but logically it is, your average will be an integer. An integer divided by an integer is an integer, even if you are saying my return type is a float. All it will do is put a 0.0 at the end of it. That's not what you want. It's an entirely wrong answer. Right? So this variable has to be a float where you're doing your sum. You'll say, oh, let me take a sum that is integer and then still do, it won't work. Integer divided, it always does the right hand side first. This is done first. And then the answer is stored in a variable. So if you're trying to integer by integer, will always give you an integer. Putting it into a float variable does not matter. It just makes it 0.0. It adds 0.0 at the end, which is again a wrong answer. So start with the float. You could use 2 variables if you wanted. I didn't bother to because I didn't see the need of it. So you could use a sum and an average, add in sum and then say sum divided by student marks, take a variable. It's not required. Avoid local variables if you can. The more you use them, the more mistakes you're liable to make. Why use them? They're created. Time execution time is more. But if I would recommend this, if you're going to use a method a number of times, suppose I was using size here. I was again using it here in a for loop. I was again using it here. Then I would put it in a local variable once and then use it in my code. Because 3 method calls are more expensive than 1 local variable. So you have to think, you have to make it good, efficient, right? And if you don't think, it's a small method, it's just 4 lines. But if you're not thinking, then you will never think. Correct. Right? So start thinking correctly. Then you will never make a mistake when you go on. That's all I can say. Right? So this was common. Students kind of started with an int here, and that's a mistake. Even if you're saying return a float value. So double was okay. I didn't bother to do double. Double can be done. For me, float was okay, but nothing stops you. Even this will work. You can create a double variable. And you can create a double variable. Right? If you really have to be precise, I would use double variables more with money than with anything else. This was just a mark. But that's okay. If you want to make it double, nothing stops you. Right? That's all. That's all that was required. So if it was empty, nothing to be done. Throw an exception. Otherwise, calculate an average. That's all. That's one for loop. And then return the average divided by the student size. The clear marks. I don't know, 50% I think got it. I'm saying clear the list. I'm just saying remove all marks of the student. Maybe he's changed his semester. It just needs to be initialized. You won't kill the student object and create it again. The student is now in a new semester. Those marks have been taken care of. Now you just want to clear his list for the next semester. So the student object still is existing. All I do is clear his marks. Right? Now this method has no parameters and no returns. So all you do is you just give its description. That's it. That's all you need. There is no return. There is no parent. Yes. Clear and remove all? No, there is no difference. Remove all is also okay. There's a method called remove all also, right? Unless I don't think there is a difference, but to be sure, all you have to do is, I don't think there is. But let's see. Maybe one returns something and one doesn't. Yeah, there is a remove all for sure. But is there a Is there a difference? I can't remember off my head. So there is a remove all for sure. I know that. So there's clear. Clear has no return type. Void removes all the elements from the list. And remove all is returning a Boolean value. So it says removes all of the elements of this collection that satisfies the, oh, here it is, remove all, there is, remove all, there is, but they're returning Boolean values. Removes from the list all of its that are contained, and it needs a parameter. So clear doesn't need a parameter. That's the difference, right? So you can use, this is just more work. It's asking for which collection to be removed, right? But that's fine. I mean, if you need to, and it is returning a Boolean value. So you'll say, if I don't need to use the Boolean value, sure, you don't need to use the Boolean value. You may not but this is the right way of doing it. If you're using the other one, then you should be, it's returning a Boolean value and you're not doing anything with it. That would be more useful if here I was returning a Boolean value. And I say, tell me if the list was cleared or not. Then I would use it. But here I wouldn't. See, I don't have to bother. I don't have to pass the list. So it's just a different way. You could write it this way. So your, it would be what? What does it need? It needs a parameter. It's called remove all, and it returns a Boolean value. Cannot find. Oh, so is it a static method? No, it's not a static method. So see, this is more work. Like this is not so, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. This is how I'll have to call it. It is kind of over, like it's not so friendly. I have to give the name of the object before it also and in the list also. So clear is just easier. And then it's returning a Boolean value logically. Logically, I don't have to. I should be saving it in a Boolean variable. When methods return values, you should, I mean, you're using a method if you want to use its return value. Then I could have done this, or I could have done, oh, Boolean here, or if I wanted to, and if I could have done this, but this was more useful if this had a Boolean going back. Then it would have been a better one to do. But if I'm not saying anything, I'm only saying clear it, then, there is a clear which is just more easy to use. It's much easier to use, see? So just use that. Remove all, the difference between remove all and clear. One, remove all required a parameter, and remove all was returning a Boolean value. So this just made sense. But I think you did a remove all or something, and I think I must have given marks depending upon how you used it. I can't remember now. Or I may have made a mistake at all. I can't remember now, but I've seen remove all in a couple of answers. Okay, now the last one. The last one said, return the student ID and his or her average mark rounded. Right? Rounded means convert it into an integer. Right? That's what rounded means. So if it was a 21.6, it will become 22. It was a 21.4, it will become a 21. That's the round method. And I said, math class has the, and I also gave this hint, the math class has mathematical methods. So all you had to do was open the math class, right? And you were allowed to use the math class. Okay, so now what do we need? Now, why didn't I call it toString? Because that's what I usually told you. I said, if you're returning information of an object, call toString. Use it, override it. The problem with using toString here was that the toString method cannot throw an exception. It cannot. I cannot override it if it is throwing an exception. You'll say, why do you need to throw an exception? I need to throw an exception because I'm calling a method that is throwing an exception. This is a rule in Java. If a method calls another method which is throwing an exception, then your method signatures need to have the throws clause. Otherwise, it won't work. You have to. And I can't do this with toString and say it is an override because the normal toString method of the object class doesn't throw an exception. So I said, I cannot tell you to override it. It was for this reason I didn't tell you to call it toString. This was the reason. I cannot, because if you're going to override a method, it has to have the same signatures as the parent class. And your parent class does not have throws exception in it. And this is why I'm telling you to throw exception objects and not illegal argument exceptions. I don't see any illegal argument exception. Why did you choose illegal? Am I passing it an argument? No. Am I passing an argument to calculate average? No. Why would you throw an illegal argument exception? So choose an exception which makes sense. And I said throw an exception. This was the reason. I wanted to see that you could put throws clause correctly. If I don't do this, if you forget, see, it's not a big deal. These IDs are so helpful. See, if you bring your mouse here, it says unreported exception must be caught or declared to be thrown. So if you don't do it, it will tell you you're not doing it. How long does it take to put a throws there? I mean, it's giving you so many hints. The ID is so helpful. It's saying, and you'll say, what is it? It is saying you're using the calculate average method. The calculate average method is throwing an exception. Either you catch it or you throw it further. I'm not even expecting you to catch it. Classes don't catch exceptions. They say, I'll throw it. It's the application's job. Whoever is using the student class should take care of it. I'm not even expecting you to do it. But if you did a try catch, I kind of let it go, but I think I hardly saw it in one. So that's all you have to add. And then now what do I want? I want to return a string. I don't want to do a system out println. I'm not asking you to. I said it returns a string. Okay, so what is it returning? A string. And I did a format right here itself. I use the string.format right here. I said student with ID percentages has an average mark of %D. Why? Because the rounded is an integer, not a float, right? So then what? Get the student ID. Try to use get methods here, please. Instead of just saying student ID, it's just a nod. Two string methods will usually use get methods. Anywhere else, it's an overkill. But again, I leave it to you. I'm not docking marks for this. And this is all I do. I round the average. I use the round method of the math class. It's a static method, math.round. And I call the calculate average. It gives a float back to me. The float is converted into an integer, and that's what goes back. That's all you needed. One return statement. Job done. Class is complete. Right? That's what was required of you. Now you can ask me questions, if any. Like, what was not clear in here where it kind of, you got stuck? It was, if you kind of think of it, it was not tough at all. It wasn't. I mean, if you're being honest. What was not clear in the exam is what I would like to know, so that I know what I should do in future. You know what I'm trying to do? I'm ready for healthy criticism. So that I can improve my way of asking. Because the aim is to find out how much you've learned, to help you to move forward. Like, that's the aim. Exams have to be done. You can't avoid them. Exams have to be done. That's how education is. And I'm not even asking you to memorize anything. It's an open exam. It's an open book exam. It's just a normal logical exam. Nothing to be memorized. Henry.
I noticed that you don't even need to import math.
No, because math belongs to java.lang. Math belongs to java.lang. If you go to here and go to your math class, and you look at its hierarchy, there it is. It belongs to the java.lang. You don't even need to import it. If you needed to, it would have given you an error. See, ID also helps you. But if you were not using ID, which not everybody does that, but if you were even, all you have to do is see which package does it belong to. And all you do is put an import. In an array list, when you declared it, remember there was a squiggly under it and it said, oh, you have to import it, and you imported it. You didn't even think about it. So IDs are good. I like them, but you know what? I don't like them for that. They don't let the student or the programmer think. But at that stage, the programmer knows this stuff. But you are a student. You may not know it now, and you may never realize it. So if you don't have NetBeans and you are said, oh, here is TextPad, can you type your program? Then you will say, oh, you may panic. You'll say, I don't know which classes to import. I don't know which packages to import. So that's why think, always think. When it's giving you an error, bring your mouse over it. See what it is trying to tell you. It said unreported exception. When you bring your mouse to array list, it says, I can't find array list. It's saying, I don't know what it is. You say, well, how can it not know? It's in the Java API. And then you think, oh, it doesn't know because that package, I haven't imported that package. So even before taking hints, you should know what the error is saying. I've always said error reading is important, especially in IDs like NetBeans and Eclipse, because they help you so much. So it's important, because what if you don't have it? What if I say you can't use NetBeans? So you have to learn the language. You have to learn the nits and tricks and things, everything of the language, small things. And that completes the class. Now, again, I don't know how many of you tried to write the tester, but remember I said you could always do it with BlueJ, but you can't do it with BlueJ if this is your first time trying it out. But an easy way of quickly working, if everything works, was to open it in BlueJ, create a new class. it already exists. Okay, because I've already tested it here. So I can copy it here if I like. And you can very quickly, once your class is ready, there are 4 or 5 methods. You can quickly do it. For example, if you forget to do this for whatever reason, if you forget to do this and you try to add a mark, it will give you an error. So small things can be very quickly. So in an exam environment, I can't usually give you my tester because then you'll figure out this method needs these parameters. It has to return this values. And of course, you definitely need to know Java to figure it out, but I'm not giving out solutions. That's why I can't give you testers. Maybe in the final exam, I can give you a tester because at that point of time, I'm hoping you know what you're doing, right? But I'm asking you to do something. So if you want, and I've shown this in class, that BlueJ can quickly do it. But again, if you don't have time or you panic or whatever, you can try it for the first time. But if this was ready, then all you had to do is you go right click, you compile it. If there are any errors that will come up, then you create a student object, pass the student, that's the name of the instant, and maybe pass, it was an ID, it was a string. So pass it a string, it's ready. You can start adding marks. You can say calculate the average and it will come up with saying, oops, there is nothing for the student, and that's fine. That's how BlueJ works. That's how it will show you an exception. So you can do an average mark. Can you see clear marks? Yeah, it won't do anything. Can you add a student mark? Yes, let me add a mark of 12 because it is an integer. Now, can I see his average, or can I get the list of his marks? And it will come as a list, inspected, and then it shows, oh, there is only one element. That's what you're expecting. There is only one element. You added one, which was your 12. Right? So you can play with it very quickly. It doesn't take time. It will not even take 10 minutes to test it. But of course, if you've done it before, right? And it will quickly do it. Can you clear the list? Is my clear working? So can I add a mark which is not in, oops, sorry. Can I add a mark which is not in range? So try -1. It should come up with an exception. Yeah, okay, that works. Let's try a greater mark than 100. Oh, sorry. Let's try to add a greater mark than 100, 101. Should come up with an exception. Yeah, things are working, right? That's how you quickly test it if you have to without writing a tester. Do you want to clear the list? There is a clear there. So now if I clear my marks and if I again say show me the array, it will say there is nothing, 0. The size is 0. You don't even have to go further, but you can. There is all null. So what is this 10? By default, when you create an array list, it will give you 10 elements to start with. That's the 10. So it works. Everything is working. And it will take you maybe 10 minutes to kind of test it if you want to do it in BlueJ. Right, here is the student information. Now there is no mark of the student. So let's give him 12 marks. So 12, and let's give him another 11 because it's the answer will be a float. That's why I'm making it 12 and 11. Now look at the average. Average should return you a floating number, 11.5, right? And your student information must return you this student with ID 1 has an average mark of 12. 11.5 has gone to 12. Every method is working. 10 minutes to test it. And with all that speaking and everything, I took almost an hour to do it, not more than an hour. And it wasn't like maybe just a little more practice then, if you're not there. Right? And it works. Now our job is, so this is what you did you were supposed to do in your midterm, right? So it's ready for you now. So you can pick it up. If you want to try, the patient was very similar. I can give you the patient question. Here you were dealing with the student. The other section was dealing with the patient. So a patient has a name and a patient has set of weights. It was for a pediatric clinic for children, and the weight was being recorded every time. Right? So the concept was the same. So the patient Java is also on Blackboard. If you want the question, I'll paste the question also on Blackboard. It was different, a little different from you, but as I said, that's what it is. Now I'm really thinking for the final exam that I can't even give you the same type of question because you're not respecting my request for not discussing it with students of the other section. So then whatever it is, you know what I mean? Then if it's not the same question, it's not the same question. Then you can't say, oh, theirs was tougher and ours was easy. And this is just because of a couple of students who do it and they spoil it for everybody. There are many honest students in this class, but there are a couple of students who are not following instructions. and then it hurts everybody. But that's how it is. I mean, I could go with a multiple choice, and that's fine. Nobody can remember anything. But then multiple choice means you're memorizing things, whereas programming is not memorizing, right? Programming is doing. It's more work for me. I marked it over the long week. Like I started on Monday and I just finished yesterday night. Sunday night, I finished marking. Like I had no holidays. But the aim is that you get out something out of it. So a practical test is more work for the teacher. Keep that in mind. It's more tough making, it's more tough marking. And it takes time. But if the solution is just giving multiple choice and short questions and doing it on paper, then we may have to revert to it for the final exam. Okay, so now my class is ready. We'll take a break here just because it's time for a break too. And then we will learn how to write JUnit tests for it, right? So you can do it in BlueJ, which is not tough at all if you want to do something very quickly. I've shown you how to write your own testers. We've done that. You wrote it in your first employee class. You wrote a small thing in your card game, but those were mains, right? We've done it. We've done it in employee, I remember. We've done it somewhere else also, I can't remember. Calculator, we wrote calculator after that. We've done a few classes, and I've always written a tester for it. Now I'll show you another way, which is actually automated testing. So you write less, you still have to code, but you write less and leave the job to certain classes that are available. So I'll tell you how to set up the environment for it, and then we'll learn how to write JUnit tests for a class. Okay? Okay, take a break, come back in 20 minutes, please. And we'll go from there. Yes, Bradley.
Just see the code for the comments for the calculate average and student mark. I was halfway through the commenting for both that didn't finish.
Which one?
Student mark and calculate average.
There is calculate average. I didn't complete them myself. I will if you want, and then put it back on Blackboard.
Okay, and the other one is add student mark. Thank you.
Yeah, I have one just like this.
Thank you. Also, I have BlueJ, and I'm trying to figure out how to download it.
From bluej.org. It's on Blackboard.
6 months. I came in January.
That would be in tools.
Bluej.org.
I missed 3 days.
Go to bluej.org.
BlueJ.org. Okay, and I'm looking for the one for Windows. So On the homepage, where do we do? I haven't used BlueJ since grade 12 in high school.
That's up to you. I'm not using it. I'm just showing it if you want to show.
So I don't need BlueJ for what we're learning. Would you prefer I have BlueJ for?
It's up to you.
Well, I think I'll
It
stick
makes
with-
testing easy, but that's up to you.
I think I'll stick with NetBeans for now.
It's up to you.
I just wasn't sure how much we would use it.
Where do you stay these days? Are you there?
Yeah, not today. Why not? I'm waiting for the new question.
She wanted to be a seamstress, and she was doing That was wrong. That's fine.
76. 76. It's okay.
Okay.
This is the new top, right? Oh, so now it's what represents. So this is number 6. So basically, this is going to guess about how it reads. Yes, so basically, it's fine. Well, I'll let you know this one now, so thanks. I just wanted to clarify. It means a lot. Thank you.
Tejbir, can I talk to you for a minute, please? Getting some tuition from somebody at the college?
Yeah,
From whom?
I didn't find any video over here.
So from whom I want to know? Is it not from our school?
Like I didn't get your question.
Okay. Are you taking help or learning from some other student? My Java or relational
Not
database?
right now, but I'm looking for.
Okay, so nothing in Java and nothing in relational database yet.
Yeah,
You're doing everything on your own.
yeah.
Okay. Did you talk to? Now he's left, but did you talk to did you go to the library or talk to somebody to get it tutor?
Yeah, I talked once.
To whom?
I think that's already the section on the left side when we enter the library.
And they said they had no tutor.
No, they have,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing is that like I'm asking them if somebody, if you have any Indian guy, he'll teach me in my own language, then I'll learn properly, and you know. That's
So you have problem in English.
no, not in English, but
It makes it
yeah.
easier for you.
Yeah,
in
it makes me easier.
Yeah, it makes it easier.
Yeah. Because
So
I'm good in all other subjects, but not in Java exactly.
Mhm.
So that's why I want to learn it properly.
So you're okay with the relational database? You're doing
I'm
fine?
okay.
You understand all that's
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah, that's all.
But if you keep waiting for an Indian guy, then you may not get anybody at all. And you are at
Yeah.
mid semester already, right? How did you do in Java? How was your mark in Java midterm?
14.50, I think.
14.5 out of how much? 40?
36.
So you're not doing too well, right?
Mm.
Because it's not bad, but if
Yeah,
you're still struggling, then it's high time you got somebody. Because in relational, you're still
But
okay.
the thing is like, I'm okay with this stuff now, like this set and get methods, but I don't know the basics. That's the thing I'm missing.
But then if you keep waiting for somebody, how will you go ahead then? Because sets and gets are nothing, right? They're like, even NetBeans will write them for you. If you go and say write sets and getters for me, they write the empty methods. The returns just return it,
Yeah.
and the sets will set it. They do it for you. You don't even have to write it yourself.
Yeah.
But they just do the basics. So if you you're still struggling and you want to do the course and you want to go ahead, then you need some help, right?
Yeah.
Nobody in class here who can help you?
Me and Hardeep discussing the discuss that.
His name is Hardeep?
Yeah.
Because if you kind of get a little push, maybe you'll go further. But if you leave it,
Yeah, I want to do it because I'm good in all other subjects like PHP and HTML, CSS. That's really not tough. But Java,
you
I'm not
understand.
getting that.
So you need
Yeah.
somebody's help then. I don't.
I'm doing well in PHP also. That's good for me.
So what makes it tough for Java then? Because PHP is also logical programming, right?
Yeah, but I don't think you know it's an interesting thing. I didn't find anything interesting in Java. That's where it's me.
Because in PHP you see something on the web page and it
yeah.
makes you understand it better.
Yeah. It gives me some output.
But here also, if you look at output, it does give you output if you start writing tests.
Yeah, I was thinking that it'll be more interesting when we used to do a J option pin because we get that boxes all that.
Yeah, so it makes more
Yeah.
sense to you. Then you have to write testers. Like then this JUnit testing will again be kind of, you'll have to learn how to do it. But if you really want to see J option pins and all that, then you'll have to write your own testers, which is more work, right? Which is you need to know more Java about it, like more Java.
Yeah.
Try to do that. I don't know. That means more of a visual thing then.
Yeah, visual things.
I don't know because it's like I'm still struggling with this. I don't know if I can go to GUI. GUI is anyway not in my course, but maybe let's see if I can do some GUI with you guys and will it help?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to know if you were having somebody helping you with Java because relational database wasn't too bad.
No, it's okay. I'm doing good in that.
Okay, try to find somebody, even if not Indian, try to find somebody who can help you.
Yes.
Because it's midterm already, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'll let you know if I have any problem and if you have time.
I always have time for my students if they want to come.
Yeah.
In my office hour or if they want to come anytime else, just let me know, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, guys, let's learn how to write Unit J tests now for classes. Okay, so the class is ready, right? I've added comments to it. I'll put it back on your on Blackboard. So now the aim is, how do I test this class? I just showed you how I can test it using BlueJ, but I mean, as I said, BlueJ is not something that the industry uses. It's more of a educational tool, but at least it's there. So if you need to test your class, you can always do it through BlueJ. The other option is you write a class with a main in it. So you basically write an application, you create an object of the student class, and you test its various methods. We can do that too, right? It's just I can do that too. So you basically create another class in this package. You could call it, I don't know what they call the other ones. Maybe they call it by default. I think it's called test student also when you do JUnit testing. So I'll kind of, I can't remember now. It's definitely test. It's not called test the student, but by default JUnit test also kind of creates something called test student. So I'm not giving it the same name. You can always create a class, and then in that class you can put a main method. And in your main method, you will do your testing. So you'll basically create a student object and work with it. You've done this before, right? Like I've been doing this from day one. You did it the first time in your first assignment also. So basically you create an object. So how do you do it? You go student, create a student object. Let's call it student1. You call its constructor, pass an ID to it. That's all it requires, right? And now your student is ready, right? And then you work with it. You can add a student, you can clear the list, and so on and so forth. So this is one way of doing it. So you're doing it manually. You're creating an object of class manually and doing it. So if I wanted to show the student's ID, for example, what would I do? I would kind of, just to show you, I'm not going to complete this because it's not what I'm aiming at today. I can get the student's ID by this method, right? And so one by one, I'll kind of test all methods. I'll say student1 add student mark, student1 add, and I'll see if it has been thrown. So let's add some marks. So this is kind of manual. You have to think what you need, but that's how it is, right? Student1 dot, let's add a student mark. If I try to add a mark of -1, it should throw an exception, right? This should throw an exception because I can't add a student mark with -1. Let's see if it works. What happens, right? So if you bring your mouse over it, it's going to say unreported exception again. You'll say, oh, this method add student mark is throwing an exception. What are you doing about it? So if I don't do anything about it and I am careless, like just for the heck of it, I'm going to say, okay, I don't care. I'm going to throw this exception too. And definitely runtime unit will catch it. But let's try to do this. So I added a throws exception here. It says, okay, I've used a method. This method throws an exception. And I've said I'll also throw it further. Let's try to see what happens. If you try to run this class, there, see, I get an error. So when I run it, I get a student ID of 1. That's coming from my get student ID. But when I try to add a -1, it throws an exception for me. It says the mark must be an integer value between 0 and 100. So it's not very neat, but it's coming up. To make it neat, you can always use a try catch.
So if you don't want the throws exception.
Yeah, then if you don't want the throws exception, then you will have to put this in a try catch. Okay, and this is how you do it. So you actually, you put everything in a try catch. So you try to create a student, right? And here. So all code goes in try because you're trying to do stuff. Put a try outside, whatever you had. Oops. Main. I always say put it in main and then I don't do it myself. So let's try to, this is main. Here. So what I did was okay. So if I don't want to throw an exception, and this is not the right way, I shouldn't be throwing it. I should be catching it, right? So I put everything that I want to do in a try block. So I say try to do this. So start with a try to create a student, try to put an ID, which is, I mean, I could even create a problem here. I could just put maybe instead of a string, but that error NetBeans will catch, right? It will say, oh, you can't pass it an integer. So this it will catch. This it will catch on its own. And then try to put it in and then add a catch to it. So what are you trying to catch? You're trying to catch an exception. If it was some other kind of exception, you would write that name here. I'm trying to catch the E exception. And the minimum I can do is I can just print it out. To make it neater, I'll say E.getMessage. I think it's got getMessage, or is it just message? Oh, there it is, getMessage.
Both ways work, but this one is neat.
This one is neater. Right, this one, and this is the way to go. You should make it neater. You don't want to show your user this, right? You want to show your user this. So the student, the user made a mistake. You'll say the mark must be an integer between 0 and 100. This is what you want to show your user. So therefore, in your application, you will always add try catches, and you will not say I don't bother. You can't say that. That's not how it should go. You add try catches to it. Then, and again, you add different type of try catches. If you're catching more than one exception and so on, you do that. But that's not the aim today. That's not what I want to do today. But this is one way of writing a tester. We've done this. We've done this before in examples I've done in my calculator and so on. I remember doing it. What I want to teach you today is automated testing, right? Automated testing, what happens with automated testing is it will create test stubs for you. Any, like NetBeans can do it, and of course, Eclipse can do it. And of course, if you don't have this, then you type it yourself. Then you just type it yourself. But this is what you do. You try to test every method in its own method. So every method will have a test method. Every method that you've written in your class will have a test method. And the test method will try to test what is wrong, what is correct, and everything. Like each method will test one. Let me show you how to do it. Now, before you start doing it in NetBeans, please do this for me. Go to your tools. Is it in tools? No, not in tools. Where is it? Where you can update. See in Windows. Is it in Windows? I'm trying to look for their update center. I can't remember now where I saw it. Configure, documents, tools, options maybe. Let's try options. No, it's not options. Try to see where there is where is it? You can go and that's strange. How can I forget? I've already done it. That's why I'm forgetting. You can go and say, can't even remember what it is called now. Let me see. Oh, here it is, check for updates. There it is. Go to help, please, and say check for updates. I'm trying to install something called JECO coverage that will help me in unit testing. So please go to help, say check for updates. You should be on the internet, of course. And it's given you some updates. Don't bother to do next. And it is checking for updates that are available. I didn't install anything. That's strange. Did I install anything? No. I said check for updates. Your ID. Oh, okay, my ID is up to date. Okay, so see if you can go and in the search bar say JECO. It's called JACO or JECO, whatever it is. I'm trying to look for JECO coverage because I already have it. It's called JECO coverage. Try only to put coverage in it. Right? So check for updates in yours. Mine is up to date. I'm sure you will. Do you have anything coming up when you say check for updates? Same with yours. Then where is that where I can get that means I'm not doing something right? Where did I get that extra? This is ridiculous. How can I forget it? Maybe. Okay, let me see. So it's not check for updates. I can't believe this. Source. Cannot be in refactor. Can it be in? No. Cannot be in debug. That is really strange. Where did I get it? Where I said I want to get this. Let's look tools. Oh, plugins. There it is. Go to tools, please now. My mistake. How silly can that be? I've forgotten in a week. Go to plugins. I need a plugin. I'm not looking for updates. I'm looking for plugin. Let it come up, okay? When it comes up, now search here. Mine is already done, but yours will not. Try to even input coverage only and it should come up. Try to put coverage. And, oh, sorry, please go to available plugins first and now put coverage. But put this Jacko, whatever. Now I won't see anything because I already have installed it. But you should see something come up which has a name of Jacko coverage. So what I'm trying to do is I've already installed it. It's in my installed list. I'll see it in my installed list. See, I have it here. I should have it here. What does it say? Tell me, and I can recognize it.
I can't find one.
Did you say coverage and then what comes up? Yeah, exactly. TQ1 Jacko coverage it is saying. Search for coverage here.
J.
Just say coverage, I said. Just say coverage.
Okay, I tried that, but I haven't found it.
It says there are no plugins available. So maybe you installed it last semester. I don't know. Maybe you've already installed it last semester. I'm not sure if it's not coming up. So please go to plugins, tools plugins. Please go to available plugins first because not to update. Say available plugins and try to put coverage here in your search. You should see something called Tiki Jacko coverage, right? Click it, select it and say install.
Okay, so it says here in my install section, TE1 Jacko.
Yeah, okay, so you already have it.
So I need to select it?
No, nothing. Not it's already installed on your computer. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You must have done it already, right?
Well, all I know is that I haven't used Jacko coverage before. So
Yeah, right. So everybody has that coverage now. What it does is when I write a JUnit test for my class, this will help me to tell me, have you covered everything? Have you covered testing everything? That's what it does. So it's helpful. So it will say, oh, you haven't tested for this. Oh, I forgot about it. You haven't tested for this. So it's kind of automated. And this is a plugin that will help you to ensure that you have tested everything. That's its use. Okay. Now if that's installed, now this is what we need to do. Okay. Now do this, please. Go to your student.java that you've just written, right? Right click on it and go to tools. So please select student.java that you've just written. That's the class that you wrote. I'm trying to write a test class for it. Okay. Go to tools and then say create or update tests. You see, and click on it. It will say, okay, do you want to create a test? That's what I'll call it, student test. You can change its name if you want. It's calling it student test. I'm okay with it, so I'll leave it. It says, where do you want to put it? It's giving you a location. You can put it in your own package called student, or by default, NetBeans creates a test packages also. So if you don't have it, because I've been using Jacko coverage, it gets created for me automatically, but it will tell you, I'm going to create a test package for it. If you don't want that, you can change it. I just leave it because then I know where my test classes are. And then it says, what do you need in it? Is it public, protected, package, private? You just leave everything. Don't worry about this. Just say an okay. So what it will do is, in a minute, I'll show you what it will do. In your test packages, it will create a package called student by the same name that you have, and it will create a file called student test in it. That's the file you want to work with. Now, of course, if you did not have NetBeans or Eclipse or any other smart IDE, you would type this in yourself in whatever you're using, right? But it's giving me something, so I'm starting with the skeleton here. But if it didn't, then you'll have to kind of memorize. I have to import all these files, which of course it will keep telling you as you do it. But look what it has done. So what did I do? I'm creating a test class, an automated test class for my student.java. Right? So I've written some methods in Java in that class. What this class will have methods that will test the methods that you've written in student.java. So let's go through this class. The package statement is not new to you. The import statements are not new to you. The Java doc comments, though not complete, are not new to you. You called it student test, so that's the name of the class. If you had changed it, then you will have a different name. Doesn't matter what you want to call it. It has created an empty constructor in it. Like any other class, this class also has a constructor. So if you would like to do something in the constructor, we'll do it right here. We'll see what we have to do. Please also notice then there is an annotation called at before class, and there is a setup class here. This method is a static method, does not return anything, and setup class means I want to do this before I run this class. So this method is called setup class. Setup class is like a constructor. You could do the same thing in constructor. You could do it in setup class also. But this is saying this method is always executed when this class starts execution. So it's always done. Okay, that's what it means. Not necessary to use it, but I'm telling you what they are. After class, what would you like to do when you have finished executing the class? Again, so notice how it is called tear down class. What do we want to do after you are done with running this class? So this setup method, this setup class, and this tear down class are two methods which are run when you run this class. You can run test classes. You can run them. You run them. They're just executable classes. So this method happens before you run it. That is, it is the first method that runs when you execute your class, and this is the last method that runs when it finishes execution. Right? That's what happens. So anything that you would like to do before beginning of the class execution and at the end, clearing up your files, if you have network connections, closing those network connections, closing database connections, that's what you do here. It may not be very useful for us right now because we are doing small things, but those are the two methods. Then there is a setup method which is called add. Notice this annotations also. Notice how they're called before class, after, and before. Now, what is this method? It's not called setup class, it's just called setup. This setup method is executed before any method is run. And it's automatically run. You don't have to worry about it, but don't change its name or anything. It has to be called setup, and its signatures remain whatever, and it has to have an add before annotation. This method is always automatically executed before any method is run in your class. You'll say, but every method is run, but you can make only certain methods run also, right? I'm just writing it generally now, but you can say, oh, I only want to run this method. I only want to run this method. I want to run all methods. You can do whatever you like with the test class. Then comes an after annotation. This is called the tear down method. This method is run after every method is executed. So before every method is executed, it's setup. After every method is executed, it is tear down. Okay. So there is a before class, after class execution. When the class starts, when the class ends, there is also a setup before and a setup after that can be run before any method is executed and after every method is executed. They come very helpful. The more you learn, you will get it. For now, I'll keep it simple. Now notice what it has done. It has added a few methods automatically. It has called one method called test get student ID. This is a method which is going to test your student ID, the get student ID method. It has called another method called get student marks. It is going to test your student marks method, and so on and so forth. It has added one test method for every method that you have written in your class. And what did it do? It only put the name test in front of it and an annotation at test. Now let's look at how you do it. Okay, let's go one by one. And it can become quite complicated, but doable. Okay, what do you want to test in your get student ID? You want to test that if I set the student ID to say 1, I'm expecting a 1 back. If I put Anju into it, I'm expecting Anju back. So you're going to test it. Let's see how you test it. Okay, the system out println just says which method you are testing, leave it there. Now create a student. Instead of null, create a student. How do you create a student? You go new student and create it with 1. Give him or her an ID of 1. So create an object. So this instance, you could change its name if you like. I don't usually change the names because they're good names. Instance means I'm creating an instance. What are you expecting back? Expected results. EXP means expected result. You can change all these names you like. It's entirely up to you. It is your method. But if something is available, why would I change it? System out println, I like it. When this method runs, this message will come on the screen. It tells me this method is running. Instance says, which instance are you creating? I'm saying I'm going to create an instance called new student and pass it a parameter of 1. You could have done this in your setup method. Before any method is run, you always create an instance. You can do that there also. I'm doing it here just so that we can concentrate on one method at a time. What are you expecting back? 1. Perfect. You're expecting a 1 back. And what is your result? You're putting it in result. And you're saying that my expected result 1 should be equal to what comes back when I do a get on it. So what is it testing? It is testing your get student ID method. Now you can remove this. You can remove this. So now look at this test method. This test method says I'm going to create an instance with ID 1. I will call the get student ID method of it and save the result in the variable called save result. I'm expecting that a 1 will come back, and assert equals is a method that belongs, if you bring your mouse over it, assert, it won't of course tell you, assert equals is a method that belongs to org.junit.assert package, and if you kind of look at it, it's English like. It says assert equals. It is saying that the expected result should be equal to the result. If this is what you are expecting back and it is what you get back, your test will pass. Otherwise it will fail. So what have I done? I've kind of created a test method for my method called get student. Does it make sense? Right? So this is called automated testing because it's kind of automated, right? So I don't have to, but my job, still it is my job to see that I test everything in a method. In the calculate average method, there are 3 things to be checked. No, 2 things. 1, if the list is empty, what happens? Because I'm throwing an exception. And if the list is not empty, what happens? What do you want to do in set the student mark? You want to check it. You have to write at least 3 test methods. Why? If you give it a correct value, it should work. If you give a value less than 0, it must throw an exception. If you give a value greater than 100, it must throw an exception. So you have to write 3 methods for your set student mark, add student mark. So it's still, you have to decide. It is still in your hands. You still have to, the programmer is still required to code it, but it is called automated testing because it makes the job a little easier. So instead of writing your main and then writing try catches and all that, this is another way of testing your class. And it is called automated testing. It is a third party. JUnit is actually, therefore you say it was called org.whatever. It's not java.package. It is an org.package. It is another. So it's a third party software, but we use it because we need to do JUnit testing, right? So you will, since NetBeans it's already in there, maybe in Eclipse you will have to first get JUnit and then you can use it. NetBeans already has it. But now the JCO coverage, I'll show you how it is. So I've only written 1 test for now. For now, put the rest of the in comments. The rest of your class, put it in comments. I've only written 1 test. So before, I think here. Don't remove them because we'll need them. Okay, so it's not right. It's not because because they have comments everywhere. Oh, you know what? I'm sure NetBeans has something like that. I started my commenting from here, but seems like it's not working. So if I can do, I'm sure NetBeans will have something. Then I can uncomment it. Take everything till the last method, leaving the last bracket, and let's see, where should it be? Edit. See if you have something like comment everything. Not in view. Not in navigate, I don't think so. Source. Complete code, insert code, fix, show. I'm looking how to.
You can just cut it.
I didn't want to because then if I've missed something, I didn't want to. I could, of course, cut it, but I usually don't try to remove things till it's like version control.
So this is for test get student marks and all the way to that.
Yeah, I only am keeping 1 test method. I'm sure there is some way of.
Commenting out everything without them doing it.
Yeah, and I'm trying to comment it out, but when I tried to put a comment, it wasn't working. Anybody who knows NetBeans where to comment it? I'm sure there will be somewhere to comment it. Where do you see it?
I think that's how it works.
Okay, so go control. Okay, so control key and the question mark.
Yeah.
Question mark. Where are you? Question mark.
Near the shift.
Okay, so shift and question mark. Control shift question mark. So I need a question mark. Okay, let's try. No. It has to be some. What else? Yeah, but question mark to get, or just the slash then, not the question mark, right? Okay, thank you. So it's just control question. Not okay. So when you said question mark, I thought you needed the question mark, so I said shift. Okay. So that key. Okay. Thanks, Sanjay. Okay. Now I can. I'm sure there's some way of commenting. So I only have one method. I only have one method in my class. I want to show you how to run it. Okay. So let's save it. My class is saved. Now go to this class and do a write, or you can also go to run if you like. And you can don't say run file, say test file, right? Or you can go right click here and you can say where is it? Run file. Here it is. So I'm trying to run my test file now. Okay. So I'm trying to run the test file. So run it. When you go run, you will notice that here it will say the test has passed. So you see this green bar, there is only one test. So the test has passed. So that is right. So that means it has done right. But now have I completed my testing? Of course I haven't. I only tested one method. How can that be done? You can do this. There is where the JCO coverage comes. If you go to your main project to student and do a right click there and say test with JCO coverage. Now just say test with JCO coverage. Okay, when you say test with JCO coverage, what will happen is this: it will test it, but it will also tell you something else, and I'll tell you in a minute. When it says here, of the student class, you have only done a coverage of 11%. You're still missing tests. So until I see 100% here, that means I haven't tested my class fully. So that way it tells me that you haven't written your test class completely. So it kind of helps you if you miss out something. That's the use of JCO coverage. Okay. So JCO coverage is not needed to write a test class or to run it. It is needed to see that you have covered all the tests. So that's why JCO coverage is recommended. Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure why, but I got this warning saying could not access the URL to the external browser. Check the browser configuration.
I don't know. That's your browser then. I really can't say. It should automatically open it in a browser window.
Well, we didn't open it up in the browser window, but everything else seems to be working.
That's okay. But if you don't see the JCO coverage, then how will you know whether you've tested everything or not? So you're testing the student class, right? You're testing the student class, and then now ignore the test the student. This is something I wrote, right? So you can ignore it completely. But notice how it is saying you have only covered 15% and you are still missing. You are missing. So now I know I haven't done the whole job. I haven't done the job. So that's JCO coverage. Come back to NetBeans now. Let's write the second method. So let's comment one at a time now. Now it is testing the get student marks. How will I test the get student marks? Okay, so what's the way of converting back, guys? Same thing? Okay, thank you. Okay, so uncomment your second method now. Uncomment. I haven't tested my constructor yet, guys. I want to test each and every method, but I'm doing it one by one. Okay. Now, what is this method? It says this method will get the student marks. Now, to check it, you first have to add some student marks, right? Only then can you test it. So, okay, so let's start. So let's create a student again. Remember, this is entirely dependent upon how I've written my class. I can't write a tester for your class. You need the class. So I'm going to create another student called with one ID one just for the heck of it. And now I'm going to add a few marks to this student. So you should know that to add some marks, this is how I should do it. Take the instance and add the student mark. Let's add some marks. Mark 1 and take this. Just add a few more marks. Can you guess why that red squiggly is coming? Because that method is throwing an exception. So we'll say throws exception here also. So let's add a few marks. So I'm saying if I add, you'll say, but where are you checking? Oh, one, you can add one, it is not less than 0. Remember, that's the job of add student mark. We'll do that too. I'm just going how it has written it. So if I add 1, 2, 3, 4 marks back to it, and now it is saying, okay, what is your expected result? This method was returning an array list. This method was returning an array list, right? So what is your expected result now? You tell me, what is your expected result? How do I initialize this expected result and how do I do it? You tell me. Make a guess, otherwise, of course, I'll tell you. I just want to see if I can do the constructor first, but that's okay. What should be the size of your list? Let's look at it one way. What should be the size of your list if I've added 4 marks? 4, right? So that's one way of testing if I've all 4 marks got added. That's one way. Or the other way is this method test gets student marks. Let me see if I even wrote it or I didn't think it was necessary, but we can do it. I don't remember doing it. That's okay. So now let me try it. What is your expected result? Your expected result is you should have an array list. Or maybe it can be done in other, it should not be null. Let me see if I've done it some other way. I can always test the size, but that's not what I want to do for a minute. Because I wrote so many testers and because this was new for me, but it's kind of, I get it now. But anyway, that's not the big deal. Test, add student mark, test, calculate the average. I think I didn't even check it. That's okay. Let's try it here. Okay, now how do I initialize an array list right here? Let's see. Or can I say, if I create an array list of integer, okay, we'll have to look it up. How do you initialize an array list with some numbers? Instead of, I'm expecting a 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want to use size. I want, okay, I can give it a collection. I can give it a collection. I can give it a capacity. I can give add. I can give, let's see this one. It's a collection, the type of elements in this collection. No, this won't work. It will take a little more time. Okay, let's do it an easier way just to kind of get it going. Okay. I'm going to change it a little, just a little. I'll come back to it. Don't worry. I'll find a way. I'm going to take an integer. I'm going to call it size, or you can call it expected result if you want to keep it expected result. So that at least we are using the same thing. Okay. And I'm going to say that the expected result is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, here. For a minute, I'm just doing it an easy way. Okay, and what are you expecting back? You're expecting back, what was that method that was giving you the size? Get number of courses. No, sorry, instance. Okay, keep forgetting it is called instance. There it is. Here. Now what is this? This result is an integer. I'm doing it in an easy way to at least make it work. Okay, so what are you expecting? Remove the fail one means. They've kept the fail one so that if you don't write anything in it, it will say. So I've added 4 marks to it. So this is not actually testing the get student marks. This is actually testing the number of courses. So change it, please. Get number of courses. Just change it just for the heck of it. Or I could have done it in there. But I'm just showing you ways. There's so many. I've written at least 10, 15 methods. That's okay. Let's do it one by one. So test number of courses is doing what? It is saying, okay, I'm going to test this number of courses. So just change it from student marks, just because it makes more sense. Get number of courses. Right? Okay. So you have created an instance. You added 4 marks to it. You're expecting the result to be 4. You get the number of courses and you're saying it is equal. If this works, good. If it doesn't work, that means something is wrong in your add student mark. Something went wrong. Okay. So this is just testing it. So does my get number of courses work? Again, do the same thing. Save it. And from here, go run test file. And both tests have passed. Now, just to show you when they will fail. You're saying I'm expecting a result of 3 here, for example. You make a mistake. You say I'm expecting 3, but your result will be 4. And now test it again. And your test will fail. And it should fail, right? And this will show you how the test has failed. And you'll say, oh, why has it failed? You can click on this and it will say this one failed. This is the test that failed. You were expecting a 3, but you got a 4 back. So that's how it is telling you, that is how it will catch your problems. Okay. I'm writing it the right way so it runs. If I make a mistake, it will not run. So you're expecting a 4 and it returns a 3, something will go wrong. You're expecting a 5, it returns a 6, something is going wrong, and so on. This is how you write it. So that was an easy one. The other one was a little tough. I'll have to think about it and I will. Oh, there it is. Get number of courses is already here. We don't need to do that. Let's do something else. Here, let's do this one. This is an interesting one because there are 3 jobs to be done. Let's uncomment it till here. Okay, now let's test it. It's saying test add student mark. Now think about it. The add student mark has three conditions to be tested. Mark less than 0, mark greater than 100, and a correct mark. You should test all three of them. You'll say, what if I forget? JCO coverage will tell you. Let's see if JCO coverage will tell you. Okay, so let's say test add student mark in range. I'll call it in range. That means it is correct or valid. Let's call it valid. I'm testing for whether the mark is valid. I'm testing for that. Okay, so let's say add student mark valid. Because I know there will be three methods. Create a student mark. Let's say it's a valid mark. Let's give him 24. Doesn't matter. Let's create an instance. Doesn't matter with 1 or 2. So this instance I could have put in the tier, what was it called? Setup method. So I don't have to do it in every method there, right? Okay, now what am I saying? I'm saying add the student mark to it. Okay, now you'll say, how do I test if this mark was done? It was added. It is throwing an exception when it is invalid, right? If it is a valid mark, the size of your list should be 1. Think about it for a minute. How will I test if this method works? This method should work because I'm adding the mark 24 to my list, right? So I create a student and I add a mark to it. Now, how do I test it if it is valid or not? There are a few ways of testing it. You could get the whole list back, which is more work. You could get the size of the list, which is less work, right? You could get the average mark, which should be 24. So there are a few ways of testing. It depends upon how you want to test it, because the easiest way to test is this: get the size. You've added only 1 mark, it gets added, you're okay. So that's the easiest way. But again, as I said, this is because I find it to be the easiest I'm doing it. But there may be other ways of doing it, right? So I'm not sure if I did it some other way. I can't even remember, but I can check for you. There it is. No, get number of courses, calculate average, test clear marks. Above 100, 0 to 100. Yeah, I did choose the easiest one to get the number of courses. Okay, so let's do it now. So how do I test it? So create your int and your expected result. Just I'm using the same names because it is easy. I'm expecting a 1, right? Take an int, take it to be result. Call the method on your instance and get number of courses. Come on. If the number of courses this is the easiest way. Is it assert equals? See if the spelling is correct. Assert equals. Yeah, okay, it's okay. Assert equals. And then the sequence, expected result and result. See how dependent, because you don't type it yourself, you can't remember it. This is what you're expecting, right? I added, this is a valid mark. I added a 24. If I add a 24, I'm expecting my result to be 1. When I call the method get number of courses. If this works, I'm good. If it doesn't work, something went wrong, right? Since I've added a valid mark, this mark should be added to the list. You'll say, but remember, this is the only method that gets tested. So an instance is created. When the instance is created, there is nothing in it. The array list is empty. Then you add a mark and then you say that the number of courses should be 1. Okay, now test it again. So run it. Let's run it with JCO coverage because I want to show you something. So go to your student, do a right click, or maybe there is another way, but I do it this way. Run test with JCO or run with test with JCO coverage because we are testing it. And I want to show you something. So my tests will pass. Right? We can come back. But again, it says you've only done 24%. You haven't tested everything yet. Right? So if I kind of click on it and I click on the student and I keep clicking, it's saying, see, it is saying what? You have tested the get student ID 100%. You have tested the get number of courses 100%. You have tested the constructor. I haven't yet tested the constructor kind of separately, but I've tested it because I'm doing a new instance everywhere. It says you haven't tested get student marks. You haven't tested clear marks. In the add student mark, you only tested it 71%. You'll say, but I tested it because you haven't tested its wrong things. You only tested its right thing. That's why it's saying you've only done 71% of testing in that method. So JCO coverage tells you where you forget to do the testing, right? So this is a helpful tool. Then it says you haven't tested calculate average at all. You haven't tested student information at all, which I haven't yet. Okay, so this helps. Okay, now let's come back to here. And now, oh, some tests failed. Which tests failed? Look below, but I don't see any tests below. Which tests have failed? Did we put it back on? There is a J coverage. I don't see any tests being. That's strange. Why is it saying some failed? Student test failed. Which one? Oh, we didn't make that change. The 3-4 change I didn't make back. Oh, that's why. That's why it is failing. Here, this expected result was 4. I showed it to you to make it fail. Okay, so now everything will pass. But it tells me you haven't tested everything, which is right. I haven't tested everything, right? So now let's write another test. So since this was not given to me, I'm going to pick this up from here, copy and paste. I'm going to write three of them. Okay, so this one I'm going to call, I can't call it the same name, right? This one I'm going to call test add student mark invalid, or we can say below 0. Remember that's, I have to write 3 of them. I know I have to write 3 of them. Therefore, I'm going to say below 0, above 100. Instead of saying invalid, I'm saying below 0, and I'm going to say above 100. Okay, now what do you need to test here? When you try to do something like this. Oh, sorry, not this. When you try to do something like this, it will throw an exception. Right? Now comes the thing, how do you test your exceptions? And this is a little more complicated, but it's doable. So I'm going to do this. Since I'm expecting that when I try to add a -1 mark in my student method, an exception is thrown. And if an exception is thrown, I'm okay. This is how I'm going to do it. So follow with me, just kind of let me type it in and then I'll explain what it is. Because assert equals will not work here. You'll say why? Because when I try to add a -1, I won't even go up beyond this. There will be an exception throwing right here. I can't even go beyond this statement, add student mark, student mark. I can't. So how will I say, oh, the size is 0? I can't do that. Because as soon as I try to call the method add student mark with -1, what will happen? That method will throw an exception. So if it throws an exception, none of these statements after that will be you can do this. You can say, oh, my expected result should be 0. Can't happen. Because as soon as that method throws an exception, it will stop executing right here. So I can't use the assert equals method to work. I can't do it, but there is a way of how to do it. And this is how you do it. So let me write it for you because, of course, I had to look it up. JUnit testing, it's like anything else. What you do is this. This is one of the solutions. There was another one. I found this to be much easier and straightforward. With the at test, put that you are expecting a exception to be thrown. This is how you say it, right? This is how you say it. So if it was something else class, you would say illegal argument exception class, whatever. But of course, whatever exception you're using, I'm using exception. So I'm saying that I'm expecting. So with the at test annotations, these are called annotations, please add that you're expecting that an object of type exception will be thrown. That's what you're expecting. If you're expecting that, then of course, this is all you need. Okay, this is how you will test it. We can do assert equals. It won't work. Think of it why it won't work. Because execution will stop right here when I say add student mark -1. So how can I say the size is 0? I can test that. So to test when exceptions are thrown, how do you test that the right exception is thrown? You have to add this expected is equal to exception.class with it. If it was something else, just add that, give that name here. If it was your exception, my exception, say my exception.class. Okay, that's all you have to do. Now let's test it again. So I'm expecting an exception to be thrown when I give a mark of -1. Run it. You always have to do it from here. I'm sure there must be some icon. Let's see if there is an icon there. There are some icons there. So all your 4 tests passed. Why? Because I was expecting that an exception will be thrown. Right? If I don't do this, let's just not do it for a minute. Let's not do it for a minute. Let's see what happens. Okay, let's test it again.
the second of the 3 tests?
This is the second of the 3 tests, yes.
And we haven't changed the 3rd test yet.
No, see there, it's caused an error. Right, and look at it, it's not so difficult to read. And notice what's coming here on the right hand side. These are the names of the methods that are being tested. Add student mark valid, get student ID, add student marks ID, and so on. So that system println is different. It says this method caused an error, and this is the message that you wrote in your exception. The mark must be an integer value between 0 and 100. So if you want to do it this way, keep in mind your test will fail, which is okay. If you do it the other way, your test will pass. So it's just saying a test will fail doesn't mean something is wrong. It's just saying, yeah, the test must fail, which is also okay. Right? I'm saying this test must fail. I should not be able to add -1. An error must come up. What is this error? The exception message that I gave. New exception. The mark must be between 0 and 100. So that's also okay. So this is also correct way of doing it. There's nothing wrong in it. But red doesn't mean, oh, something is wrong. Red just means, yes, the test must fail. Your test must fail. And it has failed. So do it whatever you like. So both are possible. Right? So when I said I'm trying to add a -1, it should come up with this. So just a test failing doesn't mean that something is wrong. It could still mean that it is right. But if you want to see everything green, or the test must pass, then do it the way what we had done before. Okay, but I've tested it. Now you will say, okay, have I done all my tests? Do the same thing. Go here, do a right click, say test with JCO coverage. And it will still say that you are not done. So open this up, keep opening it up. It still says that adds, oh, that's strange. Oh, it didn't even, oh, anything valid or invalid. It didn't say below 0 or greater than 100. It just said yes or no. But it is not yet complete. I haven't tested something with 100. So this could be misleading then. This is a case of misleading, right? It says you've tested this 100%. I haven't tested it 100% yes. Oh, it does say missed branches. Okay, there it is. Okay, at least here I see it. It says missed branches. So it says you've tested it by throwing an exception and you've tested it without throwing an exception. Like both cases, yes and no, valid and invalid, but you haven't covered everything yet, which is good. So it's saying, so the third row column is also important. It is saying you have missed a branch. Which branch have I missed? Greater than 100. I haven't tested for greater than 100. Let's add that now. So go back again here. So whatever you like, whichever way you like it. I'm not saying all tests must pass. It depends upon how you are writing them. So if you kind of write it this way, you will see everything green. The test must pass. If you write it the other way, then the test will fail, which is also correct. Now take the same thing, make a copy of this one. And here we'll say above 100. So notice how the names are important. In the sense that they are there. And again, here we'll say, oh, I forgot to change this above 100. That way it will tell me what went wrong, which method gave me a problem above 100. Okay. And in this one, I thought I didn't change the message. We'll say below 0. So when you write your proper names of your methods, names of methods help because when it says this test failed, you exactly know which test failed. And on the right hand side, you will see that these get printed out. So you will know that these tests have run. So it's helpful. Keep that in mind. Okay, so what should you do above 100? Do the same thing. Instead of -1, try to add 101. It could be any value. I'm just doing -1 and 101 because they're just near it, right? And try to add it, create an instance and try to add it. And this must again pass because I'm expecting an exception to be thrown. It should say an exception was thrown, right? That's why it is passed. If you want to make it fail, you want to say, oh, it should throw an exception. Do it this way. Do it this way. It's the same thing. It's just that which test must pass and which test must fail will depend upon how you have written it. Okay, let's try this again. So save this and try it again. See if there is a, which is this one, clean and build project, debug. Oh, is there a short form? Oh, okay, there it is. Test file, control and F6. At least that way it is easy. Control and. So something has failed. So let's open it. Let's open it. And this is the one that fails. And it has failed for test add student mark above 100, which it should fail. Right? So notice how these names are useful. So names are always should be good names. So I called it above 100 and I know it should have failed and it has failed. If you remove the comments, it should pass. Right? Now, if you want to test it with JCO coverage again, just to see. So with the branches, now my branches should be also 100% complete. There are something missing, but that's okay. We have to see what is missing. There, notice, add student mark has been completely tested. So this is how you will test one by one, all your methods one by one. Now for the constructor, it didn't give me anything. And another methods that are really a little difficult to test are the toString methods, because everybody can write a different message. I can say the student has an average mark of. Henry can say this student with this ID has, like his message could be different. So I can kind of check messages. But there is another way of doing it. You can do a system out printer and call it, and at least messages will come up on this. Okay. For example, let's do it. Which one? Let's do the get student mark with something that will calculate average. We haven't tested calculate average. Let's do that. Okay, so come back to, I'm trying to show you the student information method. How will I test that? It's kind of very difficult to test a method that returns a string. The others are easy. Something returns an integer, you're expecting 2. Something returns a float, you're expecting 4.5, things like that. Oh, let me show you calculate average, because that returns a float. Okay, so see, it must have it. There it is, test calculate average. So uncomment it, please. Okay, so uncomment it. Let's see. Let's work with the test calculate average. You can do a few things. You can do an answer where it is real. You can do an answer where it is an integer, and so on. Really doesn't matter, but I wrote 2 of them because in the exam I said if your student is this, then your average is this. If your student is this, so I gave you 2 examples. So I wrote both tests. Doesn't matter. Okay, so let's do a calculate average. Let's create a student. With ID. Oh, okay. I'll try to give it the same ID that I gave you in the exam. It was COPA 2017-01. I had given you an example of this person whose ID was this. He had 5 subjects. So I'll put an average 5 here just so that we are testing this. Okay, now what am I expecting back? Let's add some marks for him. I'll exactly do the same marks that I gave you in the exam, okay? Instance.add student mark. Of course, you can't remember it, and I remember it just because I've marked so many exams. So kind of take this. I added 5 marks to this, and the marks were, give me a minute, let me copy, let me paste, let me copy, let me paste. Okay, and the marks were 80, 85, and for your information, there were more, 0, 92. I want to show you how will you test for floating point numbers, because between 0 and 1, there are millions of floating point numbers. Integers are easy. You're comparing 1 with 1, 2 with 2, -1 with -1. But what about floats? 92 and 100. I had given you an example that this student has these 5 marks, and I had told you that the expected result of the average is 71.4. Now, if it is a double, we don't need to put anything. But if your method was returning a float, we would have to put F here. Keep that in mind. I think I've kept it a double. I can't remember my student. Did I make it a double or a float? There it is. And another thing that you will notice is as you run it with JCO coverage, anything that has been covered will go green, and anything that you haven't covered yet will remain red. That's another way of looking at it instead of going on the window. Okay, I just find this irritating, but that's okay. Add student marks. Not add, average. It's returning a double. So if I, for whatever reason, if this was float, I just want to show you so that, because it's different. I'll make it a float, okay? I'm making this float because I want to show you that I have to put an F here. If I don't put an F here, then of course it won't work properly, because then you will be comparing a double with a float or whatever. So you just have to be careful. If it works, it works. Okay, now I'm going to calculate an average. Right, and notice what assert equals is doing. Please notice a third parameter in assert equals. It says I'm expecting that my expected result will be equal to the result, and there will be no chance of an error. I'll try to explain what this error was. Now for these 5 marks, the average is exactly 71.4, right? There is nothing, it's exactly 71.4. But of course, it may happen that it is 71.45689, whatever. It could be something that is not exact, right? So now when I say, oh, what do I do? Because that number is quite big and I'm not so sure what it will be. Instead of 0 here, I can say that an error of 0.0001 can occur. So there can be a difference of 0.001, for example. Okay, I can say this. So this is your error that can occur. And with floating point numbers, it's a kind, because floating point numbers are floating point numbers. You know what I mean? Like there are millions of floating point numbers between any two floating numbers also. So, but because I gave you this example and this was exactly 71.4, not less, not more, there were nothing more with it. This is, I'm saying I'm not expecting any kind of error range in it, right? This is called delta error. There is no range in it. So I'm exactly expecting that you should have no errors in it. It should exactly be 71.4. So this third parameter for your information is a kind of a window that you're allowing the error to happen. So instead of 71.4, if your answer is 71.4002, I'll allow it if I give a error range. But I'm saying, no, I'm exactly expecting a 71.4. And now here, this is a good place where I can test that method called student information. Was it not called? I think it was called, there it is, student information. Now, this is a good place to test it because, as I said, otherwise testing methods that return strings are kind of difficult to check because anybody can return anything. Unless I say I exactly want to see this message, you could be putting your student ID and marks in 2 different lines. Somebody could be giving a sentence for it. Like anything can happen when you are returning a string. This way, I'm expecting it to run and I see the output and I know what is the output that was given by the user. Right? Now test it. Test it. So I'm saying that this must work. It should be a 71.4. And when I see the result, it will show me a 71 because I have rounded it. So now test it. Run the test file again. And notice what will happen in your failed. Now, which one is failing? Okay, that's okay. That's fine. But that's fine, the one because I had removed the enter. But notice something here. Notice this output. So when I ran the calculate average, notice the output student with ID, whatever, has an average of 71. So that means the person has rounded his or her answer. So the average was 71.4, it ran. That test didn't fail. And then the output is also. So this is a place where I could check my student information. So you have to this kind of thing where you can test it. Now this was rounding it. The 71.4 was rounding it and it becomes a 74. If I had given you another one, which was rounding it in the opposite direction. So I'll make a copy of this and I'll copy it again. And this was the average 4-1. So I've tested, is rounding working properly? Because maybe instead of round, you've done a ceiling, who knows? Or you've used a method which is not doing it right. So I'm going to do a round both ways. 5 less than 0.5, 5 or greater than 5. And if both answers are correct, that means you have used the round. I don't even have to open your code to look to mark it. But unfortunately, I had to check the code instead of using my tester because I think only 3 or 4 students in the class had their tester running. They had made no mistakes at all. They had exactly written, but only 3 or 4 out of 16. That's it. So my tester was wasted in the sense I couldn't use it because your parameters were not right in some cases. Or though I said, please use this method name, some students don't pay attention. They change the method name. I said return, the average should be a real, but they are returning an integer. You know what I mean? There were so many things that were not done right. So of course the tester would say fail, 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 and then there was no sense. So I had to check the code for almost all, for everybody. But 3 or 4 students, I must say 3 or 4 students at least had, I didn't have to check their code. I ran my tester, every test passed, and I knew their code was correct. So all I had to do was check their comments. So I'm glad that some of you were able to do it, but still, whatever you've done, you've put in your efforts and you did it fine. So now with 4, because I knew there was a 4-1, the marks were 80, 85, 60, and 50. This one was going upwards. The rounding was going upwards. Though I've tested it, I don't have to. JCO coverage will say you have tested it, but this was giving you a 68.75. And this I was expecting to go to 69 if you had used rounding. So one was rounding down, rounding less than 0.5 goes down, 0.5 and above goes to the upper number. So why I wrote two methods. In one method, it was a 71.4. The printing should say 71, the student information. And in the other, it was 68.75. So it should show me a 69. So I'm seeing, oh, have you done the rounding? That was another way of checking the rounding. So if you run it again, if you run it again, if I can just remember Control F6. Again, one test will fail, but the others will pass, and here it is. Right, 69. So that was checking your average method. So I've checked average. We've done the number of, what have we left? We've left a few things. Clear marks, we can do clear marks. Oh, something else. What I haven't yet tested with test average, I've left out something. Test calculate average was throwing an exception if the list was empty. I've forgotten that. Right, so again, you'll say, what if I can't remember? Look at JCO coverage, guys. It will tell you everything, that you haven't tested everything. So please do another return, another copying. So another copy now. And this one I'll say test average 0, no marks at all. This student doesn't have a mark, so we don't want to add any marks. Right, you can give him or her any, oh, so this I didn't even change, though it doesn't matter, the numbers don't matter. This was a 0.2%. It really doesn't matter. So now I calculate average, oh, did I change names? Calculate average 4, I'll call it, just because it was with 4 subjects. This was with 5 subjects, just for me, because I know I'm testing things. And of course, if you have to do it, and this is called test average 0. Okay, doesn't matter what I say the ID is. Right, now I've created a student. I have not given him or her any marks, and I'm going to call the instant. What should I do? How can I check if an exception was thrown? Two ways. Either this test will fail because it will fail. Why? Because I'm trying to calculate an average. I mean, even this is not required. I'm trying to calculate an average and it will not work. Why is it saying double? Oh, because it was double before when we started, guys. Oh, so sorry about that. Everywhere it will say double, and it works because, yuck. That was, you created the test class before and you changed it afterwards. I changed it. I'm not sure about you.
So you wanted us to change the test averages that we use back to floats?
You can change it to double if you like, or I've done a float. I changed it to float. I wanted to show you that F. I don't put an F, it won't work. Right? Therefore, an F is required. So if you want to leave it double, that's up to you. This was just to show you that, oh, why did I need an F with it? Okay, now what happens in this case? I'm trying to call the calculate average method and I haven't added any marks to it. It should throw an exception. So again, you can leave this method as per se and it will throw an exception, which is okay. 2 tests will fail now, or you can add that I'm expecting it to be thrown, and it was, what was it called? Expected is equal to exception.class. It depends on whatever you want to do. If I don't write this, 2 tests will fail. One is already failing. So try both ways. This test will fail now. It should fail. Right? It will fail. So let's try it again. Control F6. So failed. How many tests have failed? 2 tests have caused an error. And that's what I was expecting it. So this was another way of seeing your messages. Right? So have you written a good message? Remember I said messages should be good and complete. So again, a little bit of grammatical errors were occurring. 0 and 100 were not being used in constants and so on, but that's okay. I had to switch. So it is saying the student is not enrolled in any course, and it is coming from test calculate 0 average, and it should come, right? Because I can't calculate an average if there is no mark. And the other one is coming from the mark must be an integer value between 0 and 100. So I leave it to you. It's not compulsory to have expected is equal to exception.class, but it depends entirely on you. Do you want all your tests to pass, or failing of test says, oh yes, these tests should fail, and you see a message? Whatever works for you. I've shown you both ways. It's up to you. It doesn't matter to me. When I check your assignment, of course, I'll write it my way, and I know what to expect. Okay, so now what are we left with? Clear marks. That's one. But before I do clear marks was not so difficult to do. what I wanted to do was something I have created on my own, because here, do it with me, please, because it's not very intuitive. In the sense, you may not even think about it, because it's already told you you've tested the constructor. It does happen. Students may say, oh, how can somebody forget it? Remember, you're just coding, you may forget anything. You may not have initialized your array list for whatever reason. You forget to initialize your array list. You don't say is equal to new array list. You forget it in your constructor. Then, of course, when I create a student object, it should throw me an exception that this student didn't create a list. And this is how I tested it. I'm going to write another new test for you. This is just me. No stub was provided because it wasn't provided. I'm going to, so I had to kind of, so see, when you don't write it yourself, you have to kind of think about it. So I'm going to test constructor. There are two things to test. One, a student ID, which is not so difficult to test. Okay, so this is one method I wrote on my own. And there was another method. It won't give you any constructor testing. You'll have to kind of do it yourself. Okay, so these two methods, add yourself. So I'm going to test the ID first, in the sense that, oh, the student did create an ID. And this is how I'll do it. A little bit of cheating, guys, so that I can do it quickly. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to check. So instead of saying get student ID, I'll write constructor here, because I'm testing the constructor. What if you didn't give me a parameter? Anything can happen with students, right? And not with students, with anybody who's writing code. Let's not say students. So I'm expecting that a parameter will be passed and you forgot to pass it. So I'm going to say constructor ID. Test the constructor ID. There are two instance variables that need to be set. One the construct ID and one the other one. So I've just said set student. You can say 1. I'm expecting a result of 1. I get the student ID and so here. So this way, though I've tested this in my get method, but this way I'm kind of checking that you did pass a parameter, and if you passed it, it has to be 1. So this is checking your constructor ID. This is much easier. This is not where you need a lot of brains. This is an easy method. The second one is a little more. So what have I done? I've checked if I pass an ID, then it comes out as an ID. So this is easy. What about the other one? I want to check if you did your array list properly. So let's call it whatever you like. It really doesn't matter what you call it here. Did the student remember to initialize the array list? What if they forgot? And if they forget, then of course your program will give a runtime error. But this is how I'm going to test it. I'm going to do a control V here. I'm going to say, you know what? This is much more than I need. I'll take it from here because it's much easier. Okay, what am I testing? I'm testing the marks list. Did you remember to create it? Okay, if you remember to create it, how will I check if it exists? And this is a method. Where am I? Here. I create an instance. Now, there is a method called asserts not null. There is asserts null, asserts not null. So what am I saying? I am saying that your mark list must take, oh, I can use this also now that I think about it. So if you initialized your array list by saying new array list, I'm saying it should not be null. So if there is an assert not null, there is an assert null also. If there is an assert equals, there is also an assert not equals. So that you know that there are both way methods, right? So what am I saying? I'm saying I create a student object. In the constructor, if for whatever reason, I'll show you both ways. If you forgot to do this, which you shouldn't, but you forgot, whatever, right? If you forgot to do this, it will give you test failed. I'm saying it should not be null. That's what I'm saying. It should not be null. Now, if by chance you didn't do it here and you did it here, it will still work okay, because the class, when you create an instance, the instance variables gets created. So if you forget this important line, if you forget this important line, your constructor will fail. If your constructor will fail, I know you've done something wrong in your constructor. right?
So do you prefer that line to be commented out, or do you?
How can I prefer it? If you don't do it, it's wrong. I'm trying to show you that if you don't do it, your test should fail, right? It's not preference. You have to do it. If you don't do it, the test will not pass. So let's try to pass it first. Oops. Let's try to pass it first. And it should pass, right? So let's save this. Let's go to your student test. Let's save this and do a control F6. And the failed ones are okay. We are not interested in, because we already know the 2 tests that it has passed. That means the list got created. And just now while I was doing it, we can use this now for the one where we used get number of courses. We can use that. It's not null. When I add 1, 2, 3, 4, it should not be null. Okay. Anyway, and now make a mistake. Now make a mistake. Forget this. A student forgot to do this. If a student forgot to do this, or if you forget to do this, not a student, if you wrote a program and you forgot to do it for whatever reason, who knows for what reason, and you try to run it, one test has failed. It hasn't even, 3 tests have passed and 1 test has failed. This caused an error. Oh my God, many things have caused an error because it has created problems for other methods. If there is no list, how will I add to it? If there is no list, I cannot add. If I cannot add, I cannot calculate average. Everything fails then, right? But my aim was to look at the constructor, and which is that one. It didn't even get there because, okay, oh, there it is. There's a warning here. Failed, assertion failed. There it is. It failed. But of course, it caused other tests to be failed because if there is no array list, how can I add to the array list and do whatever? So definitely more tests will also fail. But this was to show you the assert not null and the assert null. So if you're going to make something null, you can check assert null. If you want to make sure that it is not null, you can say assert. Similarly, assert equals, assert not equals. Assert true, assert false. So there are assert methods that you will have to become familiar with. Okay. So that's another way. So that's how I tested the constructor. I mean, you have to think of doing that, which tells me that we can do better with this student test, though it's kind of irritating. I can look for better ways of doing it because I don't want to do this. I want to get it back. And for your information, you can always get an array list back and convert it into, I can't remember that method, but of course it will come back. You can take an array and say as list or something. It's not just coming to my head, it will. It's just that I have to look it up, and I don't have time right now to look it up. So what have I've tested a few things. I think I've still left a few things. What have I left? Did I check my constructor? Yes. Get student ID? Yes. Number of courses? Yes. All the add marks? Yes. All the averages? Yes. Clear is left. Clear is the only one left. So let's do that too also. 48. Won't be able to do it, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. Come here. So the only one that's left is number of courses. I've already done it, though in a different, I'll work on it. Don't worry. I'll get a better way of doing it. I didn't think about it till I kind of, here, this is the test clear marks is left. Uncommented, please. That's the only one that is left. Okay, now how do you, which one did get commented? How do you test your clear marks, guys? How do you test it? The easy way to test is what? The easy way to test it is add something, clear it, and then expect a size of 0. That's all you can do. That's all you can do with the clear, right? You can't make it null. Remember, clearing is removing the contents of the list. They're not making the list null. There are two different things. Null means it does not exist. And the size equal to 0 means it doesn't have anything. So in the clear marks, what will I do is this. I forget now where it is. Test, average 0. That means I commented something else because test clear marks is sitting right here. It's sitting right here. So was it control this? Yeah, okay. So what will I do in test clear marks? In test clear marks, I will kind of first add a student, create a student, add a few marks to it, clear it, and then say that my size should be equal to 0. That's the way of testing clear. And that's how I think I did it, but it doesn't really matter, but you can always do it. Okay. So test clear marks. So we'll say clear marks, create a student. And then, of course, I can't only say clear marks because I have to add something. So let's say in student, what was it called? Instance. Okay, so let's say add student mark for a few times. Let's add 1. And let's add another one. Oh, do you see the red squiggly? Because this method was throwing an exception. So throws exception. And then let's clear marks. Doesn't matter what you add, 1 and 10. And then after you clear marks, what should you do? You are expecting a result of 0. And you are call the, what was it called? Get number of courses. Thank you. Get number of courses. And assert that they should be equals. I'm not sure which sequence. Does it matter, the sequence? I don't know. I can't remember. What is it before and after? Expected result first and result afterwards. There. That's what I'm expecting. If the test passes, that means clear is also working. So you have to kind of figure out ways to test your methods. And when you try to figure out ways, you may have to use other methods. So I have to use assert not null. And there is assert true, there is assert false for your information. So everything has a yes and a no, yes and no. And then we have that test where I'm expecting exceptions to be thrown. But if you're fine with exceptions being thrown and seeing that message, which is good, of course, that test will fail, right? So here is an example of a test class that you should know how to write, of course, for a given class. And that will be your next assignment. Your next assignment will be to create a test class for a class that I do. So I'll create a class for you, and I say now create a test class. That will be the next job. So you have to learn how to create test class. There are better ways of running it. Now I'm running it as a whole go. I'm running all methods together. I haven't used my tier and setup, but setup happens before every method tear down. You can also create a suite of test classes and run them all together. You can only run some methods if you want. They're just different ways of doing it. But the idea of writing a test class is this, right? How you run it, whether you create a suite of classes, whether you just say run this, run this, run this. You can run a suite of classes. There is an @run method. There is an @suites annotations and so on, which I can't, of course, remember off my head right now. But you can do it in different ways. But the methodology of writing unit tests is this. So every method is tested for every possible case. And the JCO coverage is not a part of testing, but it helps you to figure out where have I lost it. So now if I try to do this, if I go here and I go here and I say test with JCO coverage, I must see better results. Covered everything. I don't know, I'm still at 77%. God knows what I have left out. Not this one. Oh, no, sorry. Oops.
We keep it defined as test failed, the test cases approach.
Yeah, you can do it whatever way you like. Why am I seeing this? There it is, student. Oh, no, I've done everything here. See, it's all green. I've tested everything. The other one, which I had written test the student, it's talking about that. Here, everything has been covered. So I've tested everything in my code. That's what I want to see when I run it with for you. So every method has been tested, and you've taken care of all possible cases. So just don't go on missed instructions, also go on coverage and also go on missed branches. See everything. So everything has been tested 100%. I'll place this on Blackboard for you. Okay, I will. Whatever we've done today, I'll place it on Blackboard. Thank you for your patience, guys.
You're welcome, man. Looking forward to tomorrow's lesson.
Okay, thank you.